Chapter 8:16. The honorable martial stronghold was in an uproar. There was nothing more terrifying than their commanding officer being killed in front of them. On the walls of the stronghold, it was a mess. The soldiers were like headless flies. Their faces were pale white, their eyes filled with fear, their mouths releasing screams that they themselves did not know. He was almost roaring as he spat out the word, "Damn it," from his mouth. Bang! Wu Xian's head exploded like a watermelon. In the blink of the eye, there were no longer any figures standing on the walls of the stronghold. They then realized how laughable their own understanding was. But the two of them quickly became serious. The following battle was going to be a tough one. Suddenly, an extremely dangerous aura surged from the bottom of his heart. "Ah Kai, are we going to die?" The extremely dense white light surged over. The surface of the ice arrows were melting and vaporizing at an astonishing speed. Then the enemy is definitely on the verge of collapse. Zhong Li Bai's eyes were as sharp as blades. His tone was resolute and decisive. With the death of their commanding general, they are at a loss. With the punishment behind them, they cannot see any hope. They are at a loss and in despair. This is their lowest point. As long as they receive an attack, they will be like snow on a tall mountain. As long as there is a sound, they will crumble. So, we cannot give them the chance to breathe. We must immediately attack them until they crumble. Although Wu Xian had not been in charge for the past few years, but the army was personally brought up by him, and his prestige and reputation was unparalleled among the soldiers. Although in the past few years, his actions were not worthy of praise, but he was still the only pillar of support for everyone. What achievements, what heroes, what future, were all thrown to the back of their minds. Everyone were extremely excited, everyone listened attentively, everyone knew that in terms of understanding of the honorable martial stronghold, no one knew more than the two of them. In Xin domain, the strong were respected, and after acknowledging Tang Tian's strength, the resistance in their hearts was greatly reduced. Compared to Du Ku and the rest who had lost their composure, Du Xianyu's army had not regained their senses from the silence. All of the list of powerhouses martial artists who had their eyes on the top of their heads were like statues. Although they had not completely accepted it, but at least they did not have any extreme reactions. Du Xianyu learned from Zhong Li Bai and Nye Qiu and bowed. Although her personal strength was not considered strong, but her strategic foresight was outstanding. Although she had long made plans to join Tang Tian with her brother, she had never revealed it. She only used Tang Tian's great victory to set the tone in this way. When it came into contact with the wall, it was only the size of a soybean, but it still left behind a deep hole the size of a soybean and cracks that looked like a spider web. At a distance of 200 meters, even the extremely dense light of the stronghold could not melt it at a distance of 200 meters. But it was too fast. The vast and majestic light of the stronghold was like a sleeping giant beast that was suddenly awakened. They were surging with rage, crazily surging towards the red dot that had appeared in the hinterland. The light of the stronghold that spanned 60 kilometers had become increasingly blazing. The ethereal white light had solidified to the point of being tangible. The sea of white light that was like a raging tide lost its target and quietened down. The one who died just now should be the enemy's commander. Zhong Li Bai's expression was extremely excited as he spoke quickly. Nye Qiu had carefully measured it earlier. The Xin door's light of the stronghold has been weakened by 15%. Only when the commander of the stronghold dies will such a situation occur. This is also a unique characteristic of the honorable martial stronghold. The stronghold and the commander have a close relationship. Although ordinary soldiers can also use the light of the stronghold to a certain degree, but to use a large area of effect and might, without exception, requires the commander to lead. Are we going to join Master's camp? Compared to the despair of the Xin door, Tang Tian's side was brimming with morale. Du Ku came here with the mentality of win or die trying, but now, he saw a crack in the door of victory. If it was said that previously, Tang Tian and the rest did not place him in their eyes. Then after the battle, they had witnessed the terrifying strength of the God Armor army, and finally realized that the Tang Tian that they had underestimated had a powerful strength. 60 kilometers away from the stronghold, the tens of thousands of people quietened down. The entire battlefield had sunk into silence, as though time had stopped. Wu Xian sighed in his heart. He was startled for a moment. Currently, he was drunk every day and had nothing to do, thinking about the past when he was filled with ambition and high spirits. He could not help but feel bitter in his mouth. When Kang's lips did not have any color of blood, he was trembling and unable to speak. His entire body was trembling. Not far from him, Lu Kai's body was completely curled up behind the city wall. Both of his hands were hugging onto his knees. His entire body was trembling like a sieve, his mouth muttering repeatedly. The reason why Wu Xian raised his head was because he had sensed the undulations in the distance. When he saw the 200-odd men in the small group preparing to attack in the air, he was shocked. Zhong Libai hugged his head with his hands. His face was filled with disbelief. He spoke out hysterically. "Impossible! This is impossible! Damn it! Damn it! Master, please wait and see." The Honorable Martial Stronghold, that was over 200 years old, had a light of the stronghold that covered an entire 60 kilometers. The light of the stronghold, that had a radius of 60 kilometers, was not only used to weaken the enemy, it could transform between reality and illusion. As long as there was a need, it could instantly transform into a defensive light. To attack the Honorable Martial Stronghold, they had to break through the 60 kilometers thick tortoise shell. It's over. It's over. The long period of muddle-headedness had caused his fighting instincts to deteriorate. When he sensed the danger, he did not dodge at the first moment, but was surprised. Everyone's eyes turned to look at Tang Tian. Only Zhong Libai and Ye Qiu revealed looks of contemplation. The reason why Dooku was able to attack the Sin Door the last time was because they were bored, and intentionally lured him to the Sin Door for fun. If not, with Dooku's strength, he would definitely not be able to break through the light of the stronghold. Wu Xian's death had a decisive effect on the entire battlefield. Dooku, who was extremely excited, shot towards Tang Tian, who had just landed, and spoke incoherently. "How did you guys do it? How did you guys do it?" The Honorable Martial Stronghold, that was filled with discussions, quietened down. Tang Tian replied, "It's the same for the Honorable Martial Continent." After the arrow silhouettes, an afterimage that resembled a comet broom appeared. Wu Xian, who was filled with thoughts of obtaining merits and being transferred away, never thought that he would be ambushed. Everyone's eyes landed on Tang Tian's face, mixed with worship, reverence, and fear. The excessively young man had finally convinced all of the Sin Domain elites who had their eyes on the top of their heads. Borrowing the power of spatial laws, the ice arrow that had pierced into the sea of white light had become thinner by half. The spatial laws on the arrow body had completely disappeared, but it did not slow down at all. Like a cold lightning, it flashed past. Wu Xian's headless corpse was still standing in its original position. Despair pervaded the entire Sin Door. When Kang's voice was trembling, he did not understand why the situation would suddenly become like that. Truly beautiful. Dooku and the rest were convinced. They acknowledged the model of the army, but they firmly believed that as long as they grasped the crux of the army, whatever null division, they would definitely be trampled beneath their feet. Dooku and Du Xian looked at each other. The two of them heaved a sigh of relief. They did not wish for the Sin Domain army that they had painstakingly built up to be torn apart because of this reason. Tang Tian did not hesitate and replied, "All right." With the protection of the light of the stronghold that spanned over 60 kilometers, Wu Xian was naturally not afraid of any sneak attacks. He had never heard of any attack that could break through the light of the stronghold that spanned over 60 kilometers. He regained his senses from his daze, but was startled. A fiery red dot appeared out of thin air less than 200 meters away from him. Yes, it's over, that was the word in everyone's mind. Nie Chio had also lost his usual calmness. He did not even notice that his hands were trembling uncontrollably in his sleeves. His face was as though he had lost his soul. That's not reasonable, that's not reasonable. The sea of white light roared angrily. Many of them immediately laid on the ground and hid their bodies behind cover. Nie Chio, Zhong Li Bai, Du Ku and the rest, without exception, all had frozen expressions. Truly too young, Wu Xian could not help but sigh. Time was merciless, and time was wasting away. That young and immature face reminded him of his youth. Danger? How can it be dangerous? I am inside the stronghold. Could there be any attack that can break through the light of the stronghold? But the unimaginable attack was like a bucket of ice water, drenching them from head to toe. What a joke, how is that possible? Du Ku stood up without hesitation. Let us do it! Zhong Li Bai continued. So, the 15% weakening is only on the surface, it is far from that. The enemy's morale is extremely low. I do not know what the situation is like in the Honorable Martial Continent, but the Honorable Martial Alliance's rule is, if the general dies and the soldiers are not injured, that means that the soldiers did not protect well, and all the soldiers will be punished, and the punishment is extremely severe. Death was so sudden and so close. Before the self-mocking smile on his face could fade away, his pupils suddenly constricted. Much less 200 people, even if they had 10 times more people, they would not be able to pose any threat to the Honorable Martial stronghold. The ice arrows that had not lost their momentum effortlessly pierced through the bodies of 3 soldiers, and pierced into the walls of the stronghold. Lu Kai trembled as he muttered, "I don't want to die, I don't want to die." His face was slightly pale. The attack just now was extremely powerful, but it had consumed a lot of his energy. The list of powerhouses martial artists behind her all had their own thoughts. Everyone looked at each other, but no one objected. There was no blazing light aura, only a comet tail that seemed to appear out of thin air. It had never appeared in the past, and would never appear in the future. The entire Honorable Martial Continent was extremely confident. The only thing that made Wu Xian interested was the leader. The deathly silence lasted for a full 30 seconds. The rumbling sound was like a raging wave that was swept up into the sky but fiercely smashed down, engulfing the entire battlefield. In truth, all of the list of powerhouses martial artists looked down on the Null Division. Every single list of powerhouses martial artist not only required extraordinary talent, they also required countless of battles to temper themselves. They had stepped step by step into the ranks of Sin Domain's strongest martial artists, so how could they look up to anyone else? His gaze was blank, his expression absent-minded. Du Xin Yu also stood up. My unit requests to fight. Chapter 8:17. Amidst the loud sound, the light of the stronghold dissipated, the sun engraving on the door of the Sin door broke into pieces, the thick tortoise shell was finally broken. This made him even more determined to join Tang Tian's camp. Sacred Saint Galaxy, I'm coming. Nie Chio shook his head. There is no way to replicate this, unless you can find another Du Ku. In the past, the Honorable Martial Continent had garrisons here, but as the Honorable Martial Continent grew stronger, no one was able to threaten them, and the desolate continent's garrisons were removed. Du Ku stood at the front of the formation, and was the sharpest spear tip of the formation. All of the power of laws converged on his body, releasing a boundless light aura, making him look like a god of war. The powerful control of the law domain was displayed to its fullest. With a wave of his hand, an astonishing amount of power of laws were mobilized, transforming into powerful and peerless attacks that smashed onto the white light below. It was easy to imagine that upon falling into the swamp of the army, it would be a huge problem. There were no armies in the western region, but in the central region, which was also the most flourishing and developed region of the Honorable Martial Continent, was heavily guarded. Especially with Jiaya, one of the 5 Honorable Martial Tigers, holding the fort. If it was just Jiaya alone, and it was Jiaya who was famed for his defense. It would lessen the pressure on everyone, but the number of armies that Jiaya could mobilize caused everyone's faces to turn pale. So powerful! Zhong Libai raised his head, his face filled with shock. Dooku stared at everything in front of him. He did not dare believe his own eyes. His wish of so many years had been fulfilled, causing him to feel a strong sense of surrealism, as though he was in a dream. After a short moment of silence, even more intense cheers came out, as though the sky of the Sin domain was flipped upside down. The army's tactics revolved around Dooku. Zhong Libai thought about himself. Niechio's null division was already in its embryonic form. The Du siblings' armies were currently extremely powerful. Only his own army seemed to be far away. Only by leaving this damned place and returning to the sacred Saint Galaxy can I establish a connection with the Ursa Major constellation and obtain the blood-boiling steel monsters. The good news was that the Honorable Marshall Continent's western region was not connected to any other powerhouses, thus the number of armies was pitifully small, and their strength was rather weak. The bad news was, if they wanted to return to the Shang continent, it meant that they had to cross the entire Honorable Marshall Continent. How would she know that Tang Tian did not even listen to Niechio's words, when he heard that although everyone's situation was not easy, but they were all safe and sound, the boulder in his heart dropped, and his thoughts flew away. There was no cautious probing, just a powerful attack right from the start. Tang Tian noticed Du Xin's gaze and grinned at her. Niechio had to admit that Zhong Libai was right. Dooku, who had gained enlightenment on the law domain, had definitely reached an inhuman level, and there were no secrets in his eyes. And Du Xinu did not hold anything back. She placed all of her power and choice on Dooku. Her foresight and decisiveness was equally shocking. Dooku's existence determined the starting height of the army. But Du Xinu's growth limit would determine the limit of the army's future. The expression on Duke's face was very strange, as if he wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Especially when he saw the soldiers who had surrendered, his heart was even more complicated. All of them had long lost their fighting spirit, and upon understanding the daily training of the soldiers, he became even more anxious. With so many of them, it was impossible for them to not attract attention when they passed through the entire Honorable Marshall Continent, as it was their territory. Dooku's body trembled, the bewilderment in his eyes swept away. That's right, we have won. We are finally going to rush out of the Sin domain and start anew. All of the lost faith, courage, glory will be regained. The power of laws had been arranged and coordinated by Du Xinu and gathered at Dooku's side. Only Dooku, who had gained enlightenment on the law domain, was able to withstand such a powerful force. Du Xinu carefully observed how the null division operated, but she did not blindly imitate their tactics, but specially designed a brand new fighting style to counter the Sin domain army. He initially felt disdain towards the Sin domain army. In terms of training in laws, he could never catch up to them, but in terms of commanding an army, he had the qualifications to look down on them. Hearing that Dooku wanted to build an army, he sneered in his heart. Do you think an army is so easy to build? Tang Tian's side erupted in cheers. Which top-notch army can be replicated? Zhong Libai was surprised. As long as they lost Dooku, the army would not have any fighting strength. But he felt that it was a pity, for so many experts on the list of powerhouses had completely abandoned their own style. Dooku, who was clear-minded, when he saw that Tang Tian and the rest had already started to interrogate the Honorable Marshall Continent's soldiers and obtain information, he immediately felt ashamed. As for the Sin domain, it was just a huge prison, and had long been forgotten by the higher-ups of the Honorable Marshall Continent. From the start to the end, the Sin door did not retaliate once, and the defense of the light of the stronghold continued to be depleted. What was initially thought to be a difficult battle had turned into a boring performance of sieging a city. You have to admit this tactic suits them the best. Zhong Libai scoffed at Niechio's words, his eyes revealing a light of excitement. Simple, perfect, powerful. It has reduced the possibility of any mistakes, and the consumption of strength is extremely small. Handing the battle to Dooku, is there a better choice? I can't think of anyone else other than Master who can compare to Dooku in terms of fighting instincts. Dooku is their strongest point, and Du Xianyu has made an unparalleled choice. She has used all of her chips to strengthen her strongest point. Truly a terrifying woman. Niechio suddenly said, "The Sin door cannot hold on any longer." The enemies had surrendered. He had never seen such an extreme tactic before. It could be said that the army was completely Dooku's army. Other than providing the power of laws, the soldiers did not have any other use. There was no so-called coordination, no variations, all of the battles were decided by Dooku alone. Is that true? Zhong Libai retracted his thoughts and looked back at the battlefield, his mouth twitching. Seems like the enemy's morale is much lower than we expected. It's actually extremely tyrannical. There were thousands of tactics, but the core concept did not differ in essence. In the end, it was to gather all of the scattered strength. Du Xianyu had boldly designed an extreme tactic. All of the strength was gathered on Dooku, allowing Dooku to initiate the attack. That's true. Niechio nodded his head. The Sin Domain army had Dooku and Du Xianyu, and truly had the qualifications to grow into a top-notch army. The interrogation did not take much effort. All of the surrendered Honorable Martial Continent soldiers had long lost their will to resist, and poured out everything they knew. Like a giant swinging a heavy hammer, every strike would cause the ground to tremble. The Sin door's stronghold light surged intensely, and continued to shrink. It's too extreme, Niechio said after a long while. Everyone, I'm here. In the entire Sin domain, the only one who had gained enlightenment on a law domain was Dooku. The southern expedition could be said to have sent out all of their elites, but they were the most elite armies, as a large number of ordinary armies remained in the Honorable Martial Continent. Even though it was an easy victory, but Dooku knew that without Tang Tian, with just their own strength, it was impossible for them to obtain victory. Dooku, who was in the sky, suddenly pressed down with his palm. The surging power of laws transformed into a dazzling light pillar, and without any fancy moves, it struck the thin layer of white light. All of this greatly diluted the joy of victory, and everyone's faces became gloomy. A change in quantity would lead to a change in quality, and when the numbers reached a certain level, they would drown. They needed to cross the entire desolate continent and enter the Whitefields continent before they could encounter the first city. Du Xianyu, who was in the center of the formation, completely disappeared under Dooku's light aura and did not attract any attention. Her movements were simple and efficient, without any sloppiness. She controlled the army in an orderly manner. Du Xianyu glanced at Tang Tian, seeing that his expression was normal, as though he was not intimidated by the number of armies. The desolate continent was not small, and was a middle-sized continent, located at the westernmost part of the Honorable Martial Continent, but it was extremely barren and desolate. No one knew if it was because of the Sin domain's influence, but the energy concentration was much lower than ordinary continents, and there were no valuable minerals, thus there were no humans living there. Dooku's performance was expected, because he was familiar with the style of battle. Du Xianyu's eyes lit up, and also allowed Niechio to see her outstanding talent. To be able to perform so well in her initial army, her future was limitless. The star door inside the stronghold led to the desolate continent. Tang Tian was extremely excited. He was finally returning to the Sacred Saint Galaxy. As long as he returned, he would be able to communicate with Bing. The entire Sin domain is actually blocked by a group of people who have no fighting spirit. On Tang Tian's face there was no pride of victory. His eyes were still as clear as water. He was much older than Tang Tian, but compared to Tang Tian, he was still lacking. Du Xianyu understood her brother's feelings and said softly, "We have won, and everything will start anew." Bang! There were over 600 armies of all sizes. Nie Chio led the Null Division and entered the Sin door at the first moment. After ensuring their safety, Tang Tian, who was already impatient, brought everyone and rushed in. Du Xian Yu knew that the soldiers of the Sin Domain army were definitely not as meticulous as the Null Division, but they had an advantage that the Null Division did not have, and that was Dooku. Du Xian Yu was startled. Her expression did not change, but she noticed that Tang Tian's smile had caused the heavy atmosphere to loosen up, and she could not help but admire him. He seems to never know fear. This kind of leader is worthy of everyone's trust. Then, just at that moment, the heavy stronghold door slowly opened. The two of them were both from the academy, but their ideals were completely different. Nie Chio preferred to explore the internal laws of war, while Zhong Libai was more practical, and was more obsessed with victory. She was the true core of the army. It was under her control that her personality slowly seeped into the army, and influenced the army's fighting style. But, the strange army in front of him had completely toppled his understanding, especially Du Xian Yu's performance, although there were some flaws in the details, but she still displayed astonishing talent. Chapter 8:18. But most of them were the young and vigorous youths who thirsted for achievements. I calmed down. A figure dressed in a trench coat with a pale face appeared on the stage of the recruitment office. Compared to them, their achievements were much dimmer, but regardless of whether it was him or Aya, they were all convinced by Xie Yuan's achievements. The entire scene was extremely explosive, and became the hottest news that day, spreading throughout the entire southern region. Aya walked to his side and sat down. Her gaze landed on Wu Matian. He was much thinner than before, but his eyes were extremely black and bright, releasing a threatening light aura. Personally witnessing Wu Matian's transformation, Aya rejoiced in her heart. Luckily she was moved at that time, and pulled the fellow who roasted pig trotters over. Aya raised her head and stared straight at Wu Matian. The veins on her hand that was holding onto her sword hilt were popping out. She squeezed out a sentence. "Do you want to wipe out the entire skull unit? I only have one request. Should we change to another recruitment office?" Chiu Yong asked with some hesitation. The Southern Alliance's tenacity caused them to suffer, but they were also fearful. The other party was truly more proficient in urban warfare, but they also had casualties, but they did not have any intention of retreating. The other party's casualties were around 1,000, and the result of 3-1 was enough to make Zeke feel ashamed. But the disparity in strength between the two parties became even greater. They had the advantage in numbers, and 3,000 casualties was not enough to break their bones. And the other party only had around 5,000 people, and with 1,000 casualties, it meant that they had 20% casualties. Dai Shan patted Chiu Yong's shoulder and encouraged him loudly. "We will definitely be chosen. Ah Yong, you must have confidence." Goqing Wendao, who held on to 22 large-scale siege boats, was actually stopped by the Ocean Guardian stronghold. He did not know how to do it. He had never interacted with Xie Yuan before, and his impression of Xie Yuan was that he was an honest and cautious person with a warm temperament, but he never expected him to be so powerful. He felt that Master Crane was powerful to be expected. He was a proud son of the heavens with clear eyes that could see through people. The stone forest sand continent had become an inconspicuous meat grinder, and when Zeke reacted, their casualties had already exceeded 3,000. What was worse was their morale. The failure of the Ocean Guardian stronghold's operation, the enemies that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, and the increasing casualties every day caused their morale to drop to an extreme. Wu Matian's vision blurred. After returning to the camp, Wu Tianma sat on the ground and poured the water into his mouth with all his might. His burning throat finally felt much better. The other party was still extremely tenacious, which meant that the other party was a high-standard army, but Zeke firmly believed that it was just that they had not reached the critical point. The two of them were stunned. They looked at the stage. Xie Yuan's arrival was beyond everyone's expectations. He had indeed taken the initiative to come over. Zeke's estimation was accurate. The Skull Unit's casualties were indeed around 1,000. When Wu Ma Tian recalled the reports from the front lines, he was still in disbelief. "I don't know," Wu Ma Tian muttered, a trace of confusion and pain appearing on his face. However, his gaze became as sharp as a blade and his tone became cold and firm. "This is the only method I can think of." Wu Ma Tianma spat out the mud in his mouth, and his face that was covered in smoke became skinnier. The stubble that had not been cleaned for many days was now as hard as iron wire. There was no longer any trace of the sloppy and slippery aura that he had in the past. Instead, he was like a veteran that had been through hundreds of battles, sharp and firm. Aya suddenly turned her head and smiled sweetly. "If we win, you have to tell me." Aya was on the verge of collapsing, her face pale white after a long while. "Can we win like this?" Dai Shan said without hesitation. "We must definitely go through the selection." Wu Ma Tian, who was in a daze, asked, "What request?" "It is time for us to fight for it." Aya stood up with a calm expression. She raised the big sword in her hand. The wind blew her fiery red hair, like a regiment of raging flames, almost burning Wu Ma Tian's eyes. Even the best academies would not have such a fiery scene. There were at least a few tens of thousands of people in front of them. Qiu Yong had seen the recruitment list, and the recruitment office only accepted 200 people. Upon disembarking, the two of them were shocked by the number of people in front of them. Qiu Yong was unsure. So many people. A 20% casualty rate, to an army with weak willpower, was enough to cause them to crumble. Wu Ma Tian did not retreat, but his tone was extremely cold. "Only like that can we have a chance of winning." Aya was quiet. She suddenly thought about how she had taken over the army from her father. After that, their lives were extremely difficult. They did not have a proper meal, they lacked weapons, they lacked armor, and at times, for the sake of a few 100,000 cloud coins, they had to pay with their lives. "Please, we must win." He looked at his comrade who was 10 m away, both of them made a hand gesture, and the group of people slowly retreated, disappearing into the shadows. The entire plaza suddenly became quiet, as though it was under a spell of silence. In the stone forest sand continent, an unending chain of gray stone pillars formed a gray forest. War God Xie Yuan. Qiu Yong's eyes stared straight ahead. He held his head with his hands, his face filled with shock. Dai Shan, who was by his side, was extremely excited. The fiery scene in front of him caused his blood to boil. Protecting our homeland, achieving achievements, that is what a young man should do. It is time for us to fight to the death. Qiu Yong and Dai Shan rushed over from the faraway southern glass continent. If not for the free flights to the Southern Alliance, they would not have been able to bear the costs for such a long journey. Wu Ma Tian understood Aya's thoughts, seeing his comrades leaving one by one. He also felt extremely uncomfortable. That's right, what is there to be dissatisfied about, what is there to be unhappy about? They were originally a lowly life form, but were enjoying the treatment and respect that they could only dream of. They no longer had to suffer hunger, and were one of the armies with the best treatment. They were viewed as masters' direct subordinates, and had regained their dignity. Oh my God! That is Xie Yuan. The Skull Unit's battle plan was completely designed by Wu Ma Tian, and was extremely effective. Wu Ma Tian's outstanding talent also gained the respect of the entire Skull Unit. To Aya, Wu Ma Tian definitely had the strength to stand by Master Bing's side, and being sent to the Skull Unit was a grievance. The Skull Unit used to be a mercenary army, and although everyone was unyielding on the surface, but their hearts were lacking in confidence, and they felt that compared to the regular armies, they were still inferior. Dai Shan stuttered, a look of disbelief flashed past his eyes. It was not only him. Qiu Yong, who was beside him, was also dumbstruck. Hearing Wu Ma Tian's judgment, Aya's face became extremely ugly. The newly formed Southern Alliance had become the hope of the entire southern region. Only the Southern Alliance could stop the honorable Marshall continent from invading the South. This argument had long become the mainstream of the market. The traditional aristocratic families and merchants of the southern region had all allied together, and continued to send all sorts of resources to the Southern Alliance. On that day, Xie Yuan was appointed as the Southern Alliance recruitment ambassador, and was in charge of inspecting the various recruitment stations. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Deshing's Southern Rainbow Army, Mo Sang's Yuan Continent Army are already behind us, and can support us anytime. But I do not recommend for them to enter the battlefield now. The enemy's strength has not been depleted, and they are not fatigued yet. If they enter now, they will not be able to turn the situation around." Xie Yuan, who felt that his injuries were not serious, quickly left the hospital. The war was far from over, the Swift army was almost completely destroyed, and he planned to quickly replenish the Swift army's military strength, and return to the battlefield as soon as possible. The number of people heading towards the Southern Alliance increased by a few times. Xie Yuan was extremely satisfied. The soldiers that he selected were all outstanding in terms of strength and quality. But he would never have thought that his unintentional action would immediately attract the attention of an unscrupulous merchant. When the Southern punitive army was unstoppable, no matter how many casualties there were, it would not be a fatal blow to their morale. But when Goqing Wendao personally took action, he was still thwarted, which greatly affected the morale of the soldiers. Inside the command department, Bing waved his hand. "Aha, little Xie's body is not fully recovered yet, it is too forceful for him to participate in the battle. He should just display his remaining strength." Wu Ma Tian laughed. His skinny cheeks had a deep groove, giving off a threatening aura, but his tone was extremely warm. "Everyone's performance is not bad, there are some casualties, but not many. The enemy is even more unaccustomed to such a method of fighting than us, but Goqing Wendao has encountered a setback at the Ocean Guardian stronghold, so I am afraid that they will be anxious. The next period of time will be the true test. The enemy's offense will be extremely intense." Goqing Wendao was the war god of the army, and in everyone's hearts, as long as Master Goqing Wendao took action, there would be nothing that he could not break. They had never thought that Master Goqing Wendao would actually fail. "No matter what, we will do it. Isn't this the moment that everyone has been waiting for? Isn't this the oath that everyone had made long ago?" When the young man by the side heard his words, he could not help but speak out. "Give up on that thought. The other recruitment offices are the same, there will definitely be more people than here." He never thought that his appearance would cause the entire battlefield to erupt. After all, the army was inherited from her father, and many of the people in the army were like brothers to Aya. Seeing the familiar companions leave one after another, her heart was bleeding. The battle would become more intense, and that meant that the casualties would be even greater. Aya's hand that was holding onto her sword could not help but turn white. "Oh my God, there are too many of them!" Almost every single recruitment office in the Southern Alliance was filled with people. One of the three great generals under Goqing Wendao, Zeke's command, had been held back by them for a full 15 days. The vast stone forest sand continent had become their best battlefield. The complicated terrain made it a paradise for street battles. The skull unit was like a fish in water, while the enemy was having a hard time. Just at that moment, the clamor suddenly disappeared. In the current southern region, how could there be anyone who did not recognize Xie Yuan? All of the citizens who came to participate in the battle had seen the soul-stirring 6-hour decisive battle, and facing their idol, all of them were completely stirred up. In truth, their achievements were outstanding, and Bing had been rewarded more than once. Thank Yuan. The current Southern Alliance was extremely prosperous. The various continents of the southern region all had routes to the Southern Alliance, and it was no longer isolated and without help. The entire southern region's resources and people all surged towards the Southern Alliance from every corner of the southern region. She knew the standard of the skull unit, If not for Wu Tianma, they would definitely be defeated. The respect in her tone came from the bottom of her heart. How's the situation? Chapter 8:19. Everyone understood what was going on, and their faces changed. She looked around, all of the familiar faces were filled with fatigue, no one was unharmed. Everyone were talking at once, all of them laughing and talking without restraint, their faces were filled with sorrow. The meeting room was filled with smoke, and the floor was filled with cigarette butt. Bang! I am still too inexperienced, Bing mocked himself bitterly. This bit of pressure had tormented me to such a state. His heart was blocked by something, and the familiar pain caused his entire body to tremble. There was nothing more heart-wrenching than seeing his comrades leaving one by one. But as the commander-in-chief, he needed to be absolutely rational. So, he agreed to Wu Tian's plan, which was the best plan so far. Aya could no longer remember how many battles they had fought. For 6 days and 6 nights, they did not stop for even a moment, and the enemies were like a tide. Her great sword was filled with cracks, her beautiful face was covered in smoke, only her fiery red hair was dazzling like a raging inferno. The god gold arrow's fine lines suddenly lit up with a dazzling light aura, and along the way, the energy was frantically absorbed by it. The arrow's body lit up with a misty light aura. The light aura continued to expand, like a flowing nebula, changing continuously in the air. The following battle would be the true test. They needed to welcome Go Ching Wendao's crazy counterattack, a counterattack that disregarded all losses. Finally obtaining the precious time to rest, Aya leaned on her sword and gasped for breath. How many men do we have left? His body froze. Aya's ears twitched, she pulled out her greatsword from the ground, her expression cold. Prepare for battle. Bing was dumbstruck, the cigarette in his mouth dropped to the ground, causing sparks to fly. In an instant, everyone's vision was filled with a vast expanse of whiteness. The terrifying explosion caused everyone's ears to buzz, and they could not hear anything else. Worth it! Countless sparks flew everywhere, and the bow of a warship suddenly extended out from the flames. It was actually the second warship. It actually did not dodge at all and forcefully charged through the flames. But the large-scale warship's defense was extremely strong, and when the arrow light landed on the protective barrier, it only caused some ripples. The large-scale warship was unstoppable, and with an astonishing speed, it flew towards the wreckage. As expected of Go Ching Wendao. Roar! Crane stopped his soldiers from fighting with their lives on the line. He stared at the gigantic ships that were flying like moths to a flame. Huge balls of exploding sparks formed a straight line. They burned fiercely and then slowly extinguished. I have nothing to say, Lord Littletang. The Wei clan disciples drew their bows and arrows. In an instant, arrows rained down on the first warship. He thought of his regiment commander, Xin, Screw, and those familiar faces that had disappeared in the passage of time. The only divine gold arrow in her hand was knocked on the bowstring. Bang! The divine gold arrow instantly disappeared. Wreckage belt outside the Ocean Guardian stronghold. Someone in the crowd jeered. That's enough, third brother. That rotten life of yours isn't worth anything. The triangular-eyed man opened his mouth, but nothing came out. After a moment, he said, "It's all here." Crane immediately sensed an unusual aura, and an intense uneasiness surfaced in his heart. Boom! He had no choice but to cut off all means of retreat. There were only a few hundred people left. The second warship exploded less than 3,000 feet away from the wreckage. Speaking of which, it was strange, Crazy Tang was a freak. No matter how he looked at him, he was always a hindrance and a troublemaker. I never thought that after not seeing him for a period of time, I would miss him. With the first experience, everyone's reaction became much better. One after another, gigantic warships formed a line and rushed towards the wreckage belt at full speed. Wei Ting Ting and the rest revealed looks of suspicion. What was the use of such a move? All of the gigantic warships were clumsy, and were unable to pass through the wreckage belt, so they had to use small-scale warships. A roar that resembled a tiger's roar sounded out in the battlefield. Another divine gold arrow tore through the air. Suddenly, an indescribable undulation surfaced in his mind. That's enough. I actually placed my hopes of victory on such a person. When did I fall to such a state? I must be hallucinating. A look of sorrow surfaced in Aya's eyes. She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I'm sorry, everyone." When it struck the first warship's protective barrier, the protective barrier trembled intensely, like a soap bubble that could burst at any moment. Everyone had the same thought. After fighting for the past few days, everyone knew that if not for the wreckage belt, they would definitely not be able to hold on until now. And Goqing Wendao also knew that, so he did not hesitate to waste a few large-scale warships to create a wide path through the wreckage belt. How do I replenish spirit generals? In the stone forest sand continent, the enemies seemed to have gone crazy, and continued to advance wave after wave. Wei Ting Ting was the first to react and shouted, "Use the divine gold arrows." Everyone listened quietly, their mouths revealing knowing smiles. They could not help but think about their past lives. Bing laughed at himself. He took a deep breath. I definitely have too much pressure recently, and need to replenish myself. I must definitely stop him. Triangle Eyes raised his eyebrows and said, "So why are we willing? We are selling our lives, and that is our lives. Now that we are selling our lives for such a price, everyone, do you think it's worth it?" The distance between every warship was obviously calculated meticulously, allowing everyone to experience Goqing Wendao's meticulous mind. But the enemy was equally dauntless. The warships at the back once again pierced through the flames from the explosion of the warship in front. Bing's prediction was not wrong. The continuous battle reports caused everyone's heart to jump. Seems like I have been too nervous recently to the point of hearing things. He remained silent, his poker face shrouded in the smoke, and could not be seen clearly. Goqing Wendao planned to use these warships to blast a path through the wreckage belt. A light aura that was even brighter than the sun suddenly lit up. The familiar mumbling was heard. "Big sister, don't say that." Triangle Eyes chuckled, with a hint of self-mockery. "We buy Lu Continent's mercenaries, which one of us isn't out to sell our lives? What kind of life did everyone lead in the past? Old He, do you still remember the broken blade that you used at that time? After using it for 6 years, it can already be used as a saw. At that time, we heard that a tyrant wanted to buy an army. Alright, although we are a mercenary army, we can still be considered an army." Everyone thought, hugging onto a golden thigh is better than what we are now. Only like that could they display their superiority in military strength. The map in front of Bing was filled with all sorts of symbols and arrows. His poker face did not move and was deep in thought. The blazing light aura dimmed down, and everyone's vision gradually recovered. All of the large-scale warships were filled with explosive energy, and upon being struck, they would explode violently. Ha 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 ha. Bang. The war was starting to enter its climax. What? I feel that Third Brother's words are right. Everyone chuckled. The large-scale warships were huge and had difficulty turning, but their speed was not slow at all. Bing's mind suddenly popped out with that thought. If only Crazy Tang is here. The sharp warning sound resonated throughout the entire formation. Both parties were holding on to their breath, and whoever let it go first would lose. "Hey, Uncle Bing, long time no see." The large-scale warship's protective barrier had completely crumbled. To the Southern Alliance, they had no other choice. The defense line was crisscrossed, and they held the advantage of defending. Someone suggested to retreat and lure the enemy deeper in, but was rejected by Bing. Aya's body froze. Suddenly, he thought of something and revealed a look of shock. He ordered, "Sagittarius constellation, attack the first warship." The warship completely disintegrated, and an incomparably large regiment of flames appeared less than 500 m away from everyone. Even though everyone were attacking frantically, the fourth warship plunged into the wreckage. To Go Ching Wendao, it was the most suitable battle style for him, and was also the best way to display his fighting strength. The current Go Ching Wendao was like a lightly injured wolf. Not only would he not retreat, but he would become even more berserk. The continuous setbacks had caused Go Ching Wendao to lose too much time, and it also caused Go Ching Wendao to throw away all of his burdens. The earth-shattering explosion, the incomparable shock wave immediately swept out a large empty space in the wreckage. The training is so tiring that I want to run. On top of a piece of wreckage, Crane stood with his sword. His figure was tall and slender. His eyes were as clear as water. He looked at the army opposite him, then turned and organized everyone to retreat. Morale, the continuous bloody battles not only stabilized the defensive line, but also stabilized the morale of the Southern Alliance. The armies of the Southern Alliance were no longer as easily defeated as before. They still had the determination to win, but the despair that they had previously felt had disappeared. If they were to retreat now, the morale that they had stabilized with great difficulty would quickly crumble. Xie Yuan becoming the recruitment ambassador was just a small interlude. The intensity of the battle did not decrease at all. If we were to say that in the Battle of the Ocean Guardian stronghold, Go Ching Wendao still had an intense self-confidence and a trace of contempt, then the current lunatic was definitely clear of his own predicament. The third god gold arrow brought along a dazzling and gorgeous light mist, and pierced into the warship that had lost its protection. There is no other boss like Master. He has a lot of money, and his equipment is well taken care of. If not for the bitter training that makes people want to run, this old man would have thought that he had met a fat sheep. But after a long time, this old man's heart started to feel weak. Why, the treatment is too good. Everyone knows our own standards. This old man did not have the face to tell Master that we are not worthy of such treatment. After that, this old man's heart became afraid. We are selling our lives, with such a good treatment. I am afraid that we will not be able to keep our lives. But now I have realized that Master is the true profiteer, to obediently let us sell our lives. We are doing it willingly. Losing the wreckage was a foregone conclusion, and the following battles would not be easy. And no reaction? Can't you hear me? Is there a problem? The old antiques of the Southern Cross Army are truly unreliable. We're finished, where do we go to repair this? The terrifying explosive shock wave swept out in all directions like a raging wave. The large-scale wreckage of the sieging warship that had an astonishing size and weight was forcefully pushed over 30 m away by the ferocious force. Another sharp beast-like roar came out. Chapter 820. Tang Tian ran to the top of the wall in one breath, and could see the majestic Three Spirits City. He gasped for breath, not because he was tired, but because he was excited, an indescribable excitement. He opened up his arms, as though he wanted to embrace the bronze city. Little brats, your good days are here. The people who were gathered immediately scattered like birds, all of them acting as though they were working. Only when Big Sis comes back will we know. No. Everyone seemed to have awoken from a dream. The laughter that resonated throughout Three Spirits City caused everyone to stop what they were doing. Da. But no one expected that Big Sis would be the first to ask about Monster. Duke suppressed the excitement in his heart. The sacred Saint Galaxy had appeared in his dreams countless of times, but when it was truly in front of him, everything felt so surreal. The people around him were all extremely excited. How long do we need to build 10,000 monsters? Sai Lei rushed in like a gust of wind. Her face was filled with confidence. Upon entering, she immediately asked, "How many monsters do we have?" The young and inexperienced youth of the past was now a king. He saw fighting spirit, saw hope, saw himself, and saw everyone. The current Three Spirits City was like a volcano that could erupt at any time. After 10,000 years of slumber, it had accumulated too much energy. It could not wait to show its voice, and could not wait to display its power. "You guys have to hurry and get used to it." Zhongli glanced at them and reminded them, "Just like how we used to adapt to laws in the past, from now on, it will not be smooth sailing." Everyone started to come up with a plan. It was a joke, but at the moment it was extremely fitting. A smile that was as dazzling as the sun formed a ripple that continued to spread. Tang Tian placed his hands on his waist, facing the sky. He laughed heartily. "Stop all the projects," Sai Lei said without any hesitation. That's right, endless fighting spirit. She wanted to use this seemingly impossible method to tell Tang Tian that no matter what danger he encountered, they would become his strongest support. About 5 times. When Kong said, "Yes," everyone answered loudly. The desolate continent was extremely desolate. As far as the eye could see, it was an endless red soil plain. Du Ke's expression relaxed. He was extremely confident in himself. This was indeed an almost impossible task. The laboratory was a group of mechanical spirit weapon fanatics. All of them had researched on monster, and had benefited greatly from it. She let Tang Tian see, after the development of 3 Spirits City, the power it contained. A few seconds later, deafening cheers pierced through the clouds. "That way." When Kong Bian pointed forward, his face was pale and he looked dispirited. The experiences of the past few days were like a nightmare, quickly destroying his will that had been worn away for many years. He was eloquent and familiar with the country, and would be a suitable guide. Tang Tian's chest surged. He had experienced countless hardships, dangers, and desperate situations. How could he not be excited when he saw this scene? The silhouettes of the youths, the sparkling sweat that dripped like rain under the light, the stubbornness and unyieldingness on their faces, and the burning flames in their eyes. Only by running could he vent the excitement in his heart. He did not stop. He jumped onto the city wall and sprinted along it. Although he knew that being weak was only temporary, he still felt aggrieved for someone as prideful as him. Winter had passed and spring was just around the corner. Sighs and sighs surfaced in Tang Tian's heart, as though it was a lifetime ago. "If all the projects are stopped, it will roughly take a month," the assistant estimated. The wind whistled past his ears. Amidst the exclamations, the young man acted as though no one was around, passing through one training ground after another, passing through the lights. He ran to his heart's content. Inside the mechanical laboratory, everyone was beaming with joy. "That's right, there are also those workshops that can help us produce. We can temporarily hire some mechanical engineers to assemble or assist us." Upon thinking about that, Zhongli Bai's chest tightened. Du Ke's expression congealed. The excitement from reaching the sacred Saint Galaxy had disappeared. Now that the Master had returned safely, the higher-ups of Ursa Major constellation, who had long been shocked, rushed over to 3 Spirits City. It was still the familiar formula and the familiar smell. "Ha ha ha ha! It will take roughly 2 months, we have many projects on hand." Monster was outstanding in all aspects, but in 3 Spirits City, it was still not the mainstream. It lacked the possibility to develop further, and changing its structure was far more difficult than becoming a strong martial spirit. It could be a good supplement, but was unable to become the main mechanical spirit weapon. The laboratory was silent. Everyone looked at Big Sis in a daze. The Ursa Major constellation's recent situation was not good, and everyone was feeling depressed. Although the Master had just returned, but the depressed atmosphere had been swept away, and everyone was filled with confidence for the future. The desolate continent's energy concentration was low, and he was already not used to it. The energy that was everywhere made him feel as though he was immersed in water, and the feeling of estrangement was everywhere. If even he was like that, then the other people's fighting strength would be even weaker. Without fighting strength, they would not be able to establish themselves in the sacred Saint Galaxy, much less follow Tang Tian's footstep. "That's impossible." The adjutant shook his head. He and Ye Qiu had discussed about the army's fate, but no one cared much about it. Although the Sin Domain army was strong, but the cards in their hands were only strong, the God Armor army and the Null division were both strong, and the only weak was the Zhong division led by Zhongli Bai. We can ask Screw, during the era of the Southern Cross Army, how did they handle such situations? Monster's structure is simple, and the difficulty in producing it is not high. We can entrust the other mechanical engineers in the city to produce it, and that will shorten our production period. They had finally returned to the Sacred Saint Galaxy. This is the Sacred Saint Galaxy? He was like a gust of wind, but more like a ray of light, piercing through the layers of dark clouds, through the whistling cold wind, through the dense fog and through the despair. Everyone started to discuss. Tang Tian's return made everyone feel as though a huge rock had been lifted off their hearts. There was no news from the master, and Big Sister's temper was terrible, like a barrel of gunpowder. She would explode at the slightest touch. That was normal. In the history of the Ursa Major constellation, Tang Tian had never disappeared for such a long period of time. Master is finally back. When Master is not around, it always makes us feel uneasy. One after another, the brightly lit training grounds were bustling with activity, with shouts and shouts coming out endlessly. One after another, stubborn faces covered in perspiration, one after another, figures were running with all their might. There were heavy thuds coming out from falling down, and sparks flying out from clashes. Which direction is the White Fields continent? Zhongli Bai asked. The hurried sound of high heels caused everyone to tremble. Big Sister is back. I'm back. But her heart was filled with fighting spirit. The young man who opened up his arms looked around the entire city, and just like in the past, he announced to the world. Every single guest that had just arrived at Three Spirits City had an extremely profound feeling. On the road, everyone's faces were brimming with an indescribable light aura. They were filled with fighting spirit, like flames, emitting light and heat. Sai Lei's eyes flashed with a strange light aura, to produce 10,000 mechanical spirit weapons in a week. When she heard Tang Tian's request, she almost thought that she had heard wrongly. But after hearing Tang Tian's explanation of Bing's plan, she was enlightened. She did not waste any time and anxiously started. Taking a deep breath, he suddenly thought about the mountain peak outside of Star Wind City in the past, and how he was shouting at the valley to encourage himself. The dream that had been soaked in the blood of countless of their ancestors had finally been completed by their hands. Everyone looked at each other. They finally realized that it was a death mission, and their hearts immediately trembled. Sai Lei nodded her head expressionlessly. Split up, we need to seize the time now. How much higher is the energy concentration in the White Fields continent? Zhongli Bai continued to ask. Return to the Sacred Saint Galaxy. Zhongli Bai laughed. He was just giving them a friendly reminder. The Sin Domain army led by the Du siblings had only joined them for a short period of time, and both parties had yet to reach a level of trust. Zhongli Bai strode forward with a sinister smile on his face. The familiar bronze door was majestic and dignified, and the city walls seemed to have become taller. Sigh, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. 10,000 sets. 3 Spirits City. A brilliant smile surfaced on Tang Tian's face. Do you have any objections? Sai Lei raised his eyebrows, his gaze as sharp as swords. The only thing he could do now was to continue training the group of idiots before the master sent the mechanical spirit weapons over. What made him feel comforted was that compared to Laws, he was much more familiar with mechanical spirit weapons. Desolate continent. Don't tell me it's impossible. Sai Lei turned around, his face as gloomy as water, and said word by word, What I want to hear is how to do it. Everyone's attention was immediately attracted. A monster was the mechanical spirit weapon that Screw had helped Colin create. It looked extremely ugly, and its style was vastly different from the mechanical spirit weapons that they had designed. Monster's design truly had many redeeming qualities, for example its simple structure, sturdy skin, low maintenance costs, and most importantly, it was suitable for martial artists with weak martial spirits. Roughly 900 set. A staff member immediately replied. I wonder what trouble Master has encountered, for him to disappear for so long? But the young lad's heart, determination and passion had never changed. Duke took a deep breath. He tried his best to calm the excitement in his heart and spoke. We will definitely do our best. An extremely powerful and astonishing power. We can get Colin and the rest to help. They have specialized in repairing, and can help to a certain extent. It was as though there was a fire burning in his chest. The blood in his entire body was boiling, welcoming the bright lights, welcoming the training grounds that was filled with sweat, welcoming the majestic bronze door. He started to run. That's right, this is great. As long as Master is fine, who can be our opponent? He needed to find a way, and on this point, he was duty-bound to do so. He was the #1 man in Sin Domain, and in terms of understanding of power, no one could compare to him, and he was the most likely person to solve the problem. We can also use the old mechanical weapons in the Southern Cross Army's military equipment warehouse. As long as we modify them to a certain extent, we can use them directly, and the style is very compatible. Nothing had changed much from before. That's right, with Master's temper. He will definitely beat them up until their mothers can't recognize them. Under the lights, it was extremely clear. Humph, those people from the Honorable Martial Alliance are going to be unlucky this time. It's too long. Sai Lei said, we only have a week. Chapter 8:21. Pisces constellation suddenly had a coup, and announced that they were joining Temple. When everyone understood what had happened, all of their eyes turned red. Without saying a word, they buried their heads and started to work. Seeing everyone excited, Gui Yuan's heart was moved. She suddenly bowed. I'll have to trouble everyone. After a short moment of silence, the hall once again exploded. All of the mechanical engineers who were usually cultured and refined were all enraged, all of their faces and necks flushed red, their eyes red. Gui Yuan's heart trembled. She felt that the paper in her hands was burning hot like a piece of metal. She quickly regained her senses and said anxiously, This subordinate will go now. Gui Yuan did not say anything. Qian Sun then expanded the scale and recruited a few more mechanical engineers, and currently, Qianji Mechanical Workshop had 20 mechanical engineers. Although it was not considered a big workshop in Three Spirits City, it was considered to be famous. Everyone's ears perked up. The higher the grade of the mission, the more contribution points they could earn. Pai Pa smiled, and continued to bury her head in her work. Pai Pa, who had been writing, quickly stopped and raised her head. The image of a young man appeared in her mind. Everyone was startled again. Monster was not a high-end mechanical spirit weapon. Ever since Screw had invented Monster, it was not valued in the mechanical army of Ursa Major constellation, but outside it was extremely popular, and was a classic example of a flower growing inside the wall. That was not strange. Ursa Major constellation's mechanical army was hailed as the temple of mechanical martial artists, and had no lack of talented mechanical martial artists. Mechanical spirit weapons that were biased towards less talented mechanical martial artists did not have much use. The hall, which was originally as quiet as death, became even more deathly still. The first urgent mission was already strange, and it was the first time a high-grade mission had appeared, adding that it was Master Tang Tian's first mission. Purchasing Monster Mechanical Spirit Weapons, unlimited quantity, time limit 1 week. Three Spirits City was either filled with fanatical mechanical engineers, or people who loved to fight, and Pai Pa was the one who started all the internal affairs. But with the increasing workload, she had no choice but to increase the number of subordinates, and Gui Yuan was one of them. Sai Lei and the rest were more interested in researching mechanical techniques. The current market of mechanical spirit weapons was huge, and it was not something that any one of them could swallow up. Three Spirits City only produced high-grade mechanical spirit weapons. The high-end market had high profits, and did not require much manpower. As for the middle and low-end markets, They were opened to the other workshops in Three Spirits City. Inside the workshop, a young man with skin as dark as charcoal was concentrating on cutting bronze armor pieces. He was Qian Sen's son, Qian Lian. Qian Hua's expression was focused. His movements were as smooth as flowing water, pleasing to the eye. Temple's accumulated strength swept away the lethargy, and became even more overbearing. Everyone chatted in groups of 3 to 5, mostly discussing the sudden return of the godlike lad. Their current lives were much better than before. The profession of mechanical engineer had gone from being ignored in the past to being a hot commodity now, and it was all because of this godlike young man. Amongst them, many of them had arrived at Three Spirits City a long time ago, and knew how Three Spirits City had grown. It was night, and the gray sky of Three Spirits City was dyed red by the bright red bronze liquid. One by one, the workshops were brightly lit, rumbling throughout the night, sparks flying everywhere. Three Spirits City was as bright as day, the frigid winter was dispelled, and the heat waves surged like summer. Everyone looked at each other. Was this still the stingy Qian Sen they knew? The highest grade. Pai Pa, who did not even raise her head, spat out the 3 words without hesitation. It was no longer as easy to earn a living in Three Spirits City as before. With the gathering of many mechanical engineers, the competition had become much more intense. And the officials of Three Spirits City had unlocked the principles of the mechanical spirit weapons, immediately triggering a whole new revolution in mechanical technique. The concept of martial spirits caused endless changes in mechanical techniques, and also allowed the mechanical engineers to see a whole new world. The bronze hall was in an uproar, and the sound waves exploded out. There was a problem with today's mission. But, although the techniques were free, not everyone could obtain them. The officials of Three Spirits City had a strict method of calculating contribution points, and when the contribution points reached a certain value, they would be able to exchange for corresponding technique. Until Tang Tian returned, the oppressive atmosphere of the night before the storm suddenly disappeared without a trace. It was as though everyone blindly believed that Tang Tian would have a way, conquering the 12 ecliptic palaces, and merging them into an unprecedented super-constellation, Honorable Martial Constellation. Damn it, we need to let those brats see our power. Did someone beat us up? I have no way to help you fight, I can only use my own method to fight alongside you. This situation, after Temple digested the Aquarius constellation, Taurus constellation and Aries constellation, it became even more obvious. They started to attack, and in the short span of a few months, they had consecutively fought a few big battles, with more wins than losses, allowing the entire Heavens Road to witness Temple's terror. Using contribution points to exchange for new ideas and techniques, they strengthened themselves, and then using their own matured techniques to support the various workshops, raising their standards and lowering their costs. If you lack bronze, come to my warehouse. Everyone stop wasting time. A third of the 12 ecliptic palaces had fallen into Temple's hand. The continuous coups made the other ecliptic palaces' constellations feel insecure, as though Temple's spies were everywhere. Large-scale purges and internal strife erupted in a few ecliptic palaces' constellations. How can I let you fight alone? Let's go. We'll start now. But to ordinary mechanical martial artists, these simple, cheap, easy to maintain and outstanding fighting strength mechanical spirit weapons were the best equipment. Other than being ugly, there were no other flaws. The immense pressure enveloped everyone's heart. The hatred between Ursa Major Constellation and Temple could not be erased. No problem. Isn't it just, monster? You can have as many as you want. All sorts of strange ideas, all sorts of different experiments, all sorts of different types of mechanical spirit weapons sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain. A daring mechanical engineer shouted out, "Miss Longan, what's the grade of the mission this time?" "It's an urgent order." Pai Pa's tone was normal, and Temple, who had completed the merging of the 4 palaces, announced the establishment of the Honorable Martial Constellation. In the history of Three Spirits City, there had never been such a high-grade mission. Everyone's eyes were all attracted to the martial artist who was hanging the mission plate. The current heavens road was filled with the flames of war, and the land was scarlet for 1,000 Li Qian-sin stumbled out of the bronze hall, his mind filled with the word war. He had his own mechanical workshop, Qian-ji Mechanical Workshop. Qian-sun came to Three Spirits City earlier, and at that time, the prices of the shops there were not even half of what they were now. Three Spirits City had become the holy land for mechanical engineers, as close to 70% of the mechanical engineers were gathered there. And almost every mechanical engineer would come here to learn. All of the mechanical engineers were quick-witted people, and someone immediately asked, "Is there a war?" In a sense, the mechanical engineers of Three Spirits City and Three Spirits City had a symbiotic relationship. To be able to fight alongside a simple-minded person who never knew fear was actually a good thing. But how could such a mission be of the highest grade? This grand plan had conquered the entire temple, and clan elder and started to take control of temple. Liu Yiji's Saint Blood Army, Shan's White Leaf Army, became the two sharpest blades in his hands. The ambitious clan elder and started to make bold and decisive changes to temple. Gui Yuan tried her best to maintain a calm tone, but she also knew what kind of reaction those three words would bring. Three Spirits City's bronze hall was a classic Southern Cross style, with 12 thick and heavy bronze pillars supporting a 30 m tall dome, with simple and crude patterns. It made the place look extremely beautiful. Pai Pa did not even raise her head as she continued to write. Her face was no longer as pale as before, but had the youthful rosy glow of a young lady. Her body condition was improving day by day, but along with it came the increasing workload. Put up this order. Pai Pa still did not raise her head. War. Three Spirits City's acceptance of monster was already strange enough, but from the looks of it, the demand was huge. Watching the difference in strength between the two parties as time passed, the gap continued to widen. The unprecedented pressure enveloped everyone's heart. The one who made the decision was the weak Pai Pa. They actually dared to make a move against us. They must be tired of living. Monster? Everyone's faces were filled with unease, anger, and fear. The bronze hall was filled with people. All of their faces were filled with joy, as most of them were mechanical engineers. No one thought that Tang Tian would have any ideas, other than shouting, "Hey hey, everyone, let's chop them to death." They reckoned he would not be able to think of any other ideas. It was easy to feel that one had become braver. "Master." A young lady stood respectfully with her hands by her side, waiting for Pai Pa's orders. A group of workers walked into the hall, with Gui Yuan at the front, and the clamor immediately became much quieter. The Honorable Martial Constellation, with the 4 palaces as one, had an unprecedented energy concentration, which was twice that of the ecliptic palace constellations. Currently, with the birth of a brand new mechanical spirit weapon, it was no longer as sensational as before. The experienced and knowledgeable mechanical engineers were naturally much more picky. What truly attracted them was the new technology that Three Spirits City's officials regularly released. Haha, whoever gets the order today will be the host. These technologies to Three Spirits City were already not considered the newest technology, but to the freelance mechanical engineers, it was still advanced enough. The highest grade. I heard that the godlike young lad is back? That's great. We have to celebrate tonight. What about the order? One of the mechanical engineers blurted out. The other mechanical engineers immediately came to their senses. With so many monster, other than using it for war, there was no other reason. Although no one knew why the master needed monster, which was not considered a top-grade mechanical spirit weapon, but with such a huge demand, such an urgent demand, it made everyone feel uneasy. Being in charge of the internal affairs of Three Spirits City, she knew and felt far more than the average person. Although in this period of time, Three Spirits City was calm and peaceful, but the undercurrents were surging, the people's hearts were anxious, and everyone was just pretending to be calm. But when they saw him, saw that heartless smiling face, and listened to his nonsense, the shadow that shrouded everyone's hearts would disappear without a trace. Dong dong dong, someone knocked on the door. He clapped his hands and called for everyone, his tone unprecedentedly serious. Everyone, stop whatever you are doing from today onwards, focus on producing monster. With this move, he immediately gathered close to 90% of the mechanical workshops in Three Spirits City. Such a terrifying energy concentration meant that the martial artists' training efficiency was many times that of the ecliptic palace constellations. As long as they were given time, they would produce countless of gold-ranked martial artists and saints, and the honorable martial constellation would grow to a terrifying state. Yes, we have to celebrate. Tonight I will be the host. Qian Sen's face revealed a smile. Qian Lian's talent was much better than his. Qian Ji Mechanical Workshop would definitely flourish in Lian Er's hands. Please come in. When Crazy Tang was gesticulating and describing his experiences, she just quietly listened by the side. Pai Pa knew it was not like that. However, no one would have thought that the Divine Temple, who had put on such an overbearing appearance, would actually play such a brilliant trick. He took a deep breath. The cold winter air caused him to sober up. His face suddenly flushed red like he was drunk, his fists clenched tightly. He suddenly increased his pace and rushed back to his family's workshop. It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back. It's rare to have a few good days. Without the godlike young lad around, my heart will always feel uneasy. His son, Qian Lian, had once unintentionally obtained a special alloy formula. It was this alloy formula that earned Qian Ji Mechanical Workshop many envious contribution points, and Qian Ji Mechanical Workshop had used their contribution points to exchange for a few craftsmanship, causing their mechanical spirit weapon standard to increase greatly, and their sales to increase. It was all these enticing actions, like an invisible net, that had caught all the mechanical engineers in Three Spirits City. There were no lack of people with sharp eyes among the mechanical engineers. They naturally saw through Three Spirits City's intentions, but that did not stop them from throwing themselves into it. Everyone was startled. The bronze hall became silent. Pay the penalty fee. Qian Sen felt extremely calm. Temple's momentum was unstoppable. If we were to say, a mature craftsmanship meant profits to a mechanical workshop, then if one's contribution points reached a certain level, they could even listen to a grandmaster's lecture, which was undoubtedly the dream of any mechanical engineer. This subordinate will do it immediately. Gui Yuan's heart immediately trembled. She hesitated for a moment, then asked, "What grade is the order?" Master had just returned, and he immediately released such a mission? Gui Yuan looked around, as though she did not see the doubts on everyone's faces, and said calmly, "This mission was personally released by Master Tang Tian." Gui Yuan was surprised. "Master, there are still 2 more days before the new order." Upon hearing that there would be a mission, all the mechanical engineers in the various workshops ran over. Three Spirits City had always released missions on a fixed day. To suddenly inform everyone that there was a mission, it was definitely an urgent mission. Urgent missions meant more contribution points. Bronze spirit nuclei are not worth much. I will pile them at the shop entrance. Whoever finishes using them, take them. That's a good idea. It's settled then. A week's time, no wonder it was an urgent mission. Chapter 822. Io, this is a good opportunity to show off. This little girl is really tactful. Everyone was startled. Near the star door that led to the Sin domain, the outline of a city gradually formed. It was the exit of the Sin domain, a place that the strategists fought over, and the bridgehead that connected the Sin domain to the outside world. Initially, Du Xin and the others thought that it would be good enough if they could pass through the Sin door. They never thought that they would be able to occupy the Sin door. This place must be defended. The sea of energy there is vast and boundless. It is a sea where all kinds of energy of different attributes gather. Let's see if we can get a big one then. The more Tang Tian thought about it, the more excited he became. In addition to star stones, there are also secret treasures. We can take a batch of secret treasures there, absorb the energy there, and then send them back. This kind of power will definitely increase by a few levels. Pai Pa's expression was calm. This was not the first time they had discussed this topic. A battleship that consumed hundreds to thousands of top-grade star stones a day was simply unimaginable. After squinting at the little girl for a long time, Tang Tian felt his chest tighten. Hey, that's all you got? Where was the applause? Where was the praise? Where is the worship? Tang Cho was the first to react. He had been to the sacred Saint Galaxy before, but he had never thought of using such a method to solve the problem. There was no strategy, no setup. It was completely simple and crude, which really suited the style of the crazy young man. But as time passed, he found it increasingly strenuous. Don't worry. Sai Lei raised her head, a trace of pride on her gorgeous face. I definitely won't let you down. They are researching on how to use energy. Du Xian, you pointed to the sky far away from the city. Maybe we can consider forming an alliance. Pai Pa said. Lion King Leong is currently doing that. Tang Tian said proudly. This place doesn't have it, but the sacred region does. Tang Chao's face became gloomy. He was still used to calling the honorable martial constellation as temple. He was overseeing Heaven's Road, commanding the entire situation, and on the battlefield, he was not at a disadvantage, even against the White Leaf Army and the Saint Blood Army. This speed and efficiency shocked Tang Tian and made him secretly speechless. Looking at the energetic Sin Domain people, Tang Tian could not help but sigh in his heart. Previously, he felt that the Sin Domain people lacked courage, and thought that the majority of them did not have any desire to return to the sacred Saint Galaxy, but now, he realized that he was wrong. It was hard for him to link the passionate Sin Domain people with the previously cowardly and cowardly Sin Domain people. Tang Tian coughed lightly. Where are Duke and the rest? Only then did Tang Tian notice a group of black dots floating in the air more than 10 miles away from the city. Suddenly, lightning flashed and thunder rolled around them. Suddenly, there were explosions of fire, and suddenly, there were strong gales. Our reputation is not enough, they will not listen to us, Tang Cho said coldly. Compared to losing the initiative, I would rather fight with Temple now. There were many types of mechanical spirit weapons that were stronger than Monster in Three Spirits City, but she never thought that Tang Tian would actually choose such a mechanical spirit weapon. Now that they heard that he wanted to go deep into the honorable martial continent, they became even more worried. Can Monster take up such a heavy responsibility? Tang Tian did not realize that he was not much older than Du Xianyu, and wanted to think of a better name, but after thinking for a long time, he squeezed out a sentence. This is the desolate continent, let's call it Desolate City. When Du Xianyu saw Tang Tian, she floated over and bowed. Master, you're back? Pai Pa bowed slightly. It's ready. Desolate continent. You are too insensible. But he did not take the initiative and threw the plan to Tang Tian. It was not difficult to take over an ecliptic palace constellation, but it meant that the Ursa Major constellation's external strategy had completely changed, and only one person had the qualifications to make such a decision, and that was Tang Tian, the man who decided the fate of the world. Then I'll go back first. Tang Tian turned and asked Pai Pa, is everything prepared? Only by winning the battle, turning the impossible into the possible, an unprecedented battle that would attract the attention of the world, was it made for the godlike young lad. Time is of the essence. Du Xianyu said sternly. Master, the city has not been named yet, I hope that Master can give it a name. A light flashed past his mind, and Tang Tian muttered to himself. I think I understand. The honorable martial constellation's energy concentration is high, so our training speed cannot compare to others, right? On the other hand, as long as we can increase everyone's training speed, we will not be left behind, right? To increase our training speed, let me think, energy concentration, inheritance, hard work. We cannot compare to them in energy concentration, but inheritance, hard work, everyone is about the same. Then what else can we increase our training speed? Energy concentration, I have an idea. That is the first step. Tang Tian thought for a moment. For the time being, we will not meet any powerful enemies. By the time the Honorable Martial Continent react, it will already be a period of time later. Since the Honorable Martial Continent has everything, it will save us the trouble of transporting them. When the Sin door was occupied, they suddenly realized that their preparations were not sufficient. As long as they defended the place, the Sin domain would hold the initiative. He had sufficient confidence in taking over an ecliptic palace constellation. All of the Sin domain citizens who saw Tang Tian immediately bowed. It was no longer a secret that the Du family had joined Tang Tian's side. In the eyes of the majority, the Sin domain was led by the Du family, and for the Du family to join Tang Tian's side, it meant that the Sin domain had joined Tang Tian's side. Although the preparations were rushed, but the Du family's power in the Sin domain was unparalleled, and the entire Sin domain was completely mobilized. Countless of resources and materials flowed in like a tide, day and night, endlessly being sent over. When they were in Lupus constellation, due to the insufficient energy concentration, under Bing's guidance, they built many ancient energy houses. And after that, Sai Lei used the energy houses as a base, and further developed the training clothes. Even the Ultra Bear Egg that was created later on borrowed some of the characteristics of the energy houses. That's not right, Pai Pa said. She shook her head. Then what's the difference between us and Temple? In the current situation, Temple is the target of everyone. No matter how terrible the ecliptic palace constellations are, they are still our allies. As long as we become like Temple, the alliance will crumble. In terms of rallying power, we are still lacking compared to Temple. He had initially planned to cross the Honorable Martial Continent and return to the Southern Alliance to fight alongside everyone. But when Bing's plan came out, he immediately threw that thought to the back of his head. Compared to this plan, the Southern Alliance's battle paled in comparison. Everyone looked at Tang Tian, their faces filled with anticipation. But the first battle was the most important. He used all of his strength to retract his smile and said seriously, "Monster, you must definitely think of a way to help me prepare more the better." Suddenly, Tang Tian gasped. Upon thinking about that, Tang Tian's mouth opened wide. "That's right, you guys are rather fast." Tang Tian coughed lightly. "The man who decides victory or defeat." Tang Tian tilted his head and asked, "How do we do it?" "We can give it a try," Tang Cho muttered. "But you are currently in the Honorable Martial Continent, how are you going to obtain star rocks?" Everyone looked at each other. In theory, they could not find any mistakes, but was it truly feasible? "We don't have that many star rocks." Tang Cho shook his head. The theory behind the energy room was not complicated. It was to extract the energy from star rocks and increase the concentration of energy in the air. But the higher the concentration of energy, the more star rocks were required. Tang Tian praised himself happily. If he wanted to achieve the concentration of energy of the Honorable Martial Constellation with the four palaces as one, the amount of star rocks required was something that the Ursa Major constellation could not afford. "Of course we will snatch them," Tang Tian said. "In the Honorable Martial Continent's warehouse, star rocks are piled up like a mountain. We can just casually snatch one, and we will be rich. And Bing's plan is to let me directly attack the heart of the Honorable Martial Continent, that way we will win. The decisive strike will still depend on this godlike young lad." To be able to return to the Sacred Saint Galaxy, it was all because of Tang Tian, and everyone did not reject joining Master Tang Tian's subordinates. How can a godlike young lad waste his time on missions that are not difficult and not flashy enough? Tang Tian had already made up his mind to turn the honorable martial continent upside down. So when Tang Tian returned, he was shocked to find that there was an additional stronghold that was half completed. Sigh, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They were unable to imagine such a scene. In Heaven's Road, high-grade star rocks were extremely expensive and few in number. Just by relying on monster? Sai could not hold it in anymore. Oh my god, just thinking about it makes me happy. What do? I can't stop. Energy concentration? Tang Tian's eyes lit up. In terms of energy concentration, how can Heaven's Road compare to the Sacred Saint Galaxy? Alright, it can be considered as doing a good deed. The energy concentration in the Sacred Saint Galaxy is extremely high. High-purity star rocks can be seen everywhere. They are of extremely high grade and cheap. The warships over there use top-grade star rocks to move. Bigger warships require at least a few hundred to 1,000 top-grade star rocks in a day. Tang Tian was eager to try, thinking about the upcoming battle. He felt his blood boiling. Du Xian nodded her head. All right. Sai Lei and Pai Pa looked at each other and laughed. They were filled with confidence. Then we will only be pulled further and further away from them. Tang Cho said. Their energy concentration is much higher than ours, the martial artists' training speed is much faster than ours, and they will become stronger and stronger. Entering deep into the enemy's territory alone, overturning the seas and rivers, such a magnificent feat, was truly challenging the limits. Such a flashy thing, only the godlike young lad can do it. Look, at the crucial moment, the godlike young lad is still the most trustworthy. Attack and occupy an ecliptic palace constellation. Tang Chao's eyes flickered with light. It was a plan that he had been planning for a long time. To him, only by expanding at the same pace could he stop Temple from expanding. He was not familiar with the arrangements, but in terms of fighting, he was not afraid of anyone. Tang Tian's face was filled with excitement, his eyes lit up. Energy room, we have an energy room. Du Xian noticed Tang Tian's gaze, and turned. Master, do you have any questions? And following the continuous strengthening of Ursa Major constellation, the energy concentration would quickly increase to the level of an ecliptic palace constellation, and the energy room would gradually lose its use. The Sin domain had been suppressed for too long, and had been far away from the Sacred Saint Galaxy for too long, although they had returned to the Sacred Saint Galaxy, but to them, the Sacred Saint Galaxy was a completely foreign place, and it was hard for them to not be confident. We do not have much time left. Once Temple digests Pisces constellation, the gap between the two sides will quickly widen. We need to make a move. The further we go, the more disadvantageous the situation will be for us. Tang Cho was just a pure military general, and his methods outside of the battlefield were lacking. Watching the opponent leisurely completing their arrangements, and seeing their own disadvantage getting bigger and bigger, the feeling was extremely terrible. Even Tang Tian felt that Bing's poker face was much more pleasing to the eye. Chapter 8:23. A shout filled with joy immediately caused an uproar. To absorb all the energy in the continent, oh my god, what kind of lunatic would have such a crazy idea, and to actually carry it out? Everyone only has one mission, and that is to use the star treasures in your hands to absorb all the energy in the desolate continent. Not a single drop is left. Of course, just relying on the star treasures in your hands is definitely not enough. But it doesn't matter, I will prepare even more star treasures for everyone. 1 week, we only have 1 week. Everyone is in charge of a region, and there cannot be any blind spots. Move out. Dooku and the rest quickly thought of a way. They changed the summoning method, and first used the power of the physique to activate the law threads, and then used the law threads to form law surfaces and law domains. But I hope that the desolate city can attract the enemy's attention, and the best would be to attract more armies. Tang Tian said honestly. Everyone looked at him in envy. He trained in light laws, and the densest energy in the place was light energy, so it was not strange for him to be the first to gain enlightenment. Spirit objects, priceless spirit objects, releasing enchanting light auras and beautiful undulations. With that, he turned and walked towards the Null Division camp. Du Xin followed without hesitation, seeing Tang Tian's confident look. Her heart was filled with curiosity. To turn the desolate continent into the Sin domain, how can such a ridiculous thing happen? This is too crazy. Most importantly, according to Bing's plan, he wanted to destroy the honorable martial continent from the inside, and needed mobility, and could not defend the stronghold. Tang Tian suddenly felt that there was a possibility of defending the desolate city. When Kong pointed to the front, where the valley was faintly discernible, desolate continent's great transformation plan caused Wen Kong and the rest to pee in their pants. If there was such a stronghold behind them, then it would truly be a thorn in their backs. The honorable martial continent would definitely not be able to tolerate it, and would definitely think of ways to destroy it. Tang Tian's mind seemed to have a flash of inspiration, and he anxiously said, "Repeat what you said just now." The star treasure suddenly lit up with a dazzling light aura, and the surrounding energy surged towards the star treasure in his hands. In the blink of an eye, a gigantic energy vortex formed, causing sand and stones to fly out of the valley, and the other members had no choice but to fly out. The desolate continent's energy was sparse, but that was only in comparison to the sacred Saint Galaxy. Its energy concentration was much higher than the constellations in Heaven's Road. But under the crazy absorption of the star treasures, in just the first day, the desolate continent's energy concentration dropped by 20%. In that moment, when Kong seemed to have seen the entire desolate continent covered in dazzling light coins. There's a valley in front. It should meet the requirements. What we lack the most is time. Tang Tian said honestly, we'll be leaving in a week. Heaven's Road and the Southern Alliance are currently facing huge pressure. Which sentence? Du Xin was stunned, but she immediately repeated what she had just said. The lower realm Sin domain martial artists used the power of the physique to activate the law threads, and as the law threads were directly connected to their flesh and blood, they received the least influence. And for Sin domain martial artists who had gained enlightenment on law surfaces, their power originated from the projection of their law surfaces, and the law surfaces were not connected to their flesh and blood, thus the energy produced an intense reaction. Law domain martial artists were the same. Previously, he did not have high hopes for the desolate city, although the energy in the desolate city was sparse, but it was not the Sin domain. The honorable martial continent's martial artists were weakened, but the Sin domain's martial artists were weakened even more. Compared to that, defending the Sin door was much easier. As long as they destroyed the honorable martial stronghold, the Sin door would be no different from the other places in the Sin domain, and honorable martial artists would be courting death if they entered. That also meant that the desolate city could attract a large number of armies. If the desolate city attracted a large number of armies, then wouldn't the honorable martial continent's hinterland be even emptier? Floating in the air, they were either meditating, standing still, dancing with joy, or chanting. All of them were different. He watched on with a blank mind, watching the mountain of star treasures being distributed to the Null Division members one by one. With each person holding one, when Kang's brain had completely lost the ability to think. He was called to the Null Division to be their guide. Since he had already surrendered, he did not have any heart to resist, so he decided to be their guide. But when he stepped into the Null Division's camp, it was as though he was struck by a technique. He was dumbstruck. At his fingertip, a soybean-sized light spot lit up, releasing a gentle orange light aura. He gently waved his finger, and countless of orange light spots sprinkled down. It was a beautiful sight. The light spots were like rain, surging and changing, causing people to be dazzled. Haha, only a godlike young lad can think of such a genius idea. The first thing they needed to overcome was the interference of energy on their laws of perception. At this point, Dooku's guess was wrong. The interference of energy on laws of perception was everywhere, and the higher the realm, the greater the influence. But Dooku's understanding of laws far surpassed others, and when he realized the unique phenomenon, he thought about it and understood the crux of it. The pain only lasted for a second, and they were all shocked silly by Tang Tian's plan. Even they did not understand, it was obviously not theirs, but why did they feel the pain? Even the usually calm Du Xianyu, at that moment, was dumbstruck. Everyone's morale was roused. For one person to succeed, it meant that they were on the right path. I found it! There was no one in the valley, not even a blade of grass grew, no one knew how many years it had been since a human appeared. Other than him, the Sin Domain army contained more than half of the elites of the Sin Domain, and more than half of the top 10 in the list of powerhouses. All of them were geniuses who had gone through countless of cruel trials. When so many elites gathered together and worked together, he was looking forward to the results. Dooku's confidence was not without reason. Then we can give up on the desolate city, and focus on defending the Sin Door. Du Xianyu said calmly. This is not the Sin Domain, we can turn it into the Sin Domain. Du Xianyu had a look of suspicion, she did not understand what was wrong with his words. This is not the Sin Domain. Everyone were so frightened that they looked like quails that were being strangled. Du Xianyu had obviously thought about this problem, and spoke calmly. Defending the desolate city is actually not difficult, we only need a certain amount of time. When Big Brother and the rest find a way to control the energy, the desolate city will be hard to break through. With the advantage of defending the city, we will be able to obtain the endless support of the Sin Domain, and we will be able to sleep peacefully. That's crazy. Du Xianyu was startled. She thought that she had heard wrongly, and asked, turn the desolate continent into the Sin Domain? The third batch, the fourth batch. That's impossible. Du Xianyu shook her head and regained her composure. Du Xianyu roughly understood Tang Tian's meaning. She thought for a moment, then shook her head. That's not realistic. If we do not break through, we will lack the ability to fight against the honorable martial continent. The desolate city is a Sin Domain type stronghold, although it can be of use, but its usefulness will be greatly reduced. This is not the Sin Domain. Go there. Liang Qiu did not speak any nonsense, and immediately brought his group and rushed into the valley. But when all of these priceless spirit objects appeared in piles, like small mountains, the impact it brought was unparalleled. He could not think of any profound plans, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was a good idea. How can we make the desolate city impregnable? Du Xianyu was not surprised. As an outstanding general, she knew that the loss of a city was not important, but the victory of the entire situation was the true crux. Once they moved out and left the desolate continent, it would definitely alert the honorable martial continent, and the desolate city would then enter the sights of the honorable martial continent. For a full half an hour, when Kong and the rest sunk into a strange silence. When they gradually regained their senses, the mountain of spirit objects had disappeared, and for no reason, they felt a heart-wrenching pain. Tang Tian said happily, "You will know when the time comes." When Du Xianyu said, "This is not the Sin Domain," Tang Tian suddenly clapped his hands, his face revealing an uncontrollable joy. "That's right, this is not the Sin Domain." He wasn't the only one. His former teammates who had come with him had the same reaction. And all of these talented elites started to think about how to use laws to control energy. It was a vast project, the types of laws were as vast as the ocean, and the attributes of energy were as complicated as the stars. If we were to say that laws were a key, then they needed to find the corresponding lock. The concentration of energy in the desolate continent was dropping at a speed visible to the naked eye. Scratching his chin, Tang Tian racked his brains with a thieving look in his eyes. Ka, It was as though he could hear the countless of rusty gears in his head releasing a teeth-aching sound, the rust falling like snow. But, after a long period of hard work, the heavens did not disappoint those who persevered. He thought of a brilliant idea. Hand the problem to the smart people. When Kong looked at the energy vortex that resembled a storm, and became absent-minded. Where did this group of people come from? Tang Tian's words shocked him to death. That's right. Tang Tian was extremely pleased with his brilliant idea. The truth proved that his judgment was correct, and they quickly had a breakthrough. He turned and asked Du Xianyu, "How do you think we can defend the desolate city?" But seeing the Sin Domain army's breakthrough, Tang Tian started to consider the possibility. But what made them even crazier was that the second batch of star treasures had arrived. The Null Division were like beans that were scattered, carrying the star treasures. They ran towards every corner of the desolate continent. One after another, energy vortexes appeared endlessly in the vast desolate continent. The thin energy in the desolate continent caused the interference to be less intense, greatly reducing the time they had to explore. Tang Tian looked at the energy undulations released by the light dots in the distance, and could not help but scratch his chin. The undulations are not weak, he pondered for a moment, then understood. Using laws to control energy, it will yield twice the results with half the effort, and all of these people have a deep understanding of laws. Upon finding the knack, their fighting capabilities will soar. Tang Tian scratched his chin, his eyes releasing a thieving light. That makes sense. Liang Qiu quickly chose a location, and took out a star treasure. It was a Pisces constellation silver star treasure. Two extremely lifelike silver fishes were connected head to tail, as though they were swimming. For the sake of not affecting the construction of the stronghold, they stayed far away from the star door. They were able to use the power of laws at the initial stage, allowing them to float in the air, but to be able to fly as freely as before, they still had a long way to go. In the vast desolate continent a group of people flew. Chapter 8:24. Pai Pa suddenly thought of something and smiled. Don't worry. Soon, the pressure on you will lessen. Intelligence system, keep a close eye on Tang Tian. No matter what method you guys use, we want to know what Tang Tian wants to do. Elder and said in a solemn voice. Tang Tian was definitely plotting something with such great fanfare. Although they were allies to a certain extent, they were independent of each other. Be it the Lion King or Tang Tian, neither of them were people who would willingly submit to others. Leong had dealt with Tang Tian before, so he was also wary of Tang Tian. Why was she so sad? He didn't remember anything, but why did he still feel so sad? The entire Three Spirits city was bustling with activity, as countless of materials flowed towards them like water. The bright red furnace fire illuminated the sky, and the incessant sound of steam hammers filled every corner of the city. Yes, the indistinct voice seemed to be near and far in the wind. It was both familiar and strange. Who was that? The Ursa Major constellation wants to expand, to resist the pressure from the Honorable Marshal constellation? Since they're using monsters, how could they leave us out? Brat, don't die. Leader, don't die. Tang Cho suddenly shook his head. No, seal it first and increase the security level. Elder and subconsciously patted the armrest of the chair and said, Tang Tian is a person with deep schemes and the most cunning. He had always planned things out before taking action. He was definitely plotting something. It's highly possible that they've made preparations that we don't know about. They must have planned this for a long time. We must stay alert and be on our guard. Pass down the order. All the recent operations are cancelled. All the armies are to be on high alert. What about the Roar plan? Andre raised his head and looked at his father. The eyes of the entire Heavens Road were all focused on Three Spirits City. Yes, my lord. According to the reports from Three Spirits City, Tang Tian suddenly returned the day before yesterday, and on top of the high tower, he raised his arms and shouted, and the entire city could hear him. The manager in charge of intelligence said respectfully. On the second day, 3 Spirit Cities Bronze Hall put out the highest grade urgent order to purchase monsters. The time limit is set at 1 week. How many monsters did Tang Tian need? How much could 3 Spirits City produce in a week? No one knew, but it attracted the attention of the entire Heavens Road. 3 Spirits City's production capacity was directly related to Ursa Major Constellation's war potential. And with so many monsters, in the hands of Ursa Major Constellation, who had the highest quality mechanical martial artists in Heaven's Road, the power they could unleash was not to be underestimated. Who was Tang Tian thinking of? Xiao En and Lu Yizhi acknowledged the order. Pai Pa smiled warmly, looking at the time. Bell should have sent the letter to Scorpio Constellation. A week? Xiaowen's pupils shrank. Could it be that he's planning something? But when they thought of the spectacular scene, they were all incomparably excited. That's right, if they were to reveal that they could raise the grade of their artifacts, not only would it make their enemies wary, it would also affect the purchase of their artifacts. Tang Chou carefully examined the artifact, his face expressionless. What truly made Tang Chou excited was that he saw Tang Tian's suggestion, the possibility of using the Sacred Saint Galaxy to support Ursa Major Constellation. Ever since Colin used monsters to great effect, 3 Spirits City had specially built an army that used monsters, with Screw frequently guiding them. Colin had a face of excitement. Master, do you think we will participate in the battle? Pai Pa was also surprised, but she quickly understood Tang Chou's plan. Does General want to give the enemy a surprise? Yes. Everyone acknowledged, everyone felt that it was safer. Let's take a look first. Leong muttered, send someone to 3 Spirit City to ask. Why monsters? Us. Is it us? Woo woo woo. But this batch of treasures, we will first supply them to the front lines. Pai Pa laughed. It was as though his heart had been injected with a shot of adrenaline. His gaze was not attracted by the 22 gold star treasures. Gold star treasures were truly good things that could raise their fighting strength. But the entire battle situation was not something that could be changed with just a few gold star treasures. Leo Constellation. The 22 gold star treasures released an enchanting undulation. That was what everyone was curious about. Sigh, the subordinates beside him all sucked in cold air. Master is holding back for a big move. The past temple, the current Honorable Martial Constellation, had never lost their vigilance towards Ursa Major Constellation. Any information related to Ursa Major Constellation would be sent to Clan Elder and at the first moment. Lu Yizhi and Xiao En had the same attitude towards Tang Tian. Although Leong was powerful, but the Lion King was old, and to the two of them, Temple's biggest enemy in the future was only one, and that was the godlike young lad, Tang Tian. Everyone looked at each other. Time was tight, and they had to make a move. Although Ursa Major Constellation produced many star treasures, but they were not many, and were completely insufficient to deal with the situation. And once the other constellations knew of the news, they would definitely control the flow of star treasures, and even if they were willing to sell them, the price would be much higher than before. Southern Cross Army advance. In that moment, the atmosphere in the meeting room became oppressive. Monsters? A look of suspicion flashed past Lion King's eyes. He thought about the mechanical spirit weapon that had left a deep impression on him. After that, monsters became popular, and the military generals of Leo Constellation specially spent a lot of time to research on them. The final conclusion made them understand the type of people that the mechanical spirit weapon was suitable for. Where are you guys? Screw was in a daze, no one knew what he was thinking. Relax. Tang Chou said indifferently. To them, Tang Tian was far more dangerous than Leong. The Lion King was shrewd and unyielding, but his actions were not hard to predict. But Tang Tian was a person who was bold and unconstrained. Every action he took was inconceivable. They did not understand him, or felt that he would definitely lose. However, when the dust settled, Only then did they realize that Tang Tian was the final victor. Colin was completely excited. Since you are using monsters, how can we miss out? Heaven's Road that was filled with the flames of war actually had a short period of peace. Every party took the initiative to retreat and raise their guard. Tang Tian, who was hailed as the godlike young lad, had an extremely astonishing record, and that was that as long as he participated in a war, regardless of how the war started, the final victor and the greatest reward would always belong to Tang Tian. Spanner. Where is the spanner? Ever since Tang Tian went missing, Ursa Major constellation had turned into a defensive stance, and rarely attacked. Temple only needed to face the pressure from Leo constellation, and with much less pressure, they dared to brazenly plan a coup in Pisces constellation. Now that Tang Tian had suddenly returned, and even placed an order, it immediately caused them to feel the immense pressure. On the training grounds. Yes. The Chief of Intelligence immediately replied. The originally excited military generals immediately became even more excited. They wanted to pounce forward. Why monsters? Lu Yizhi did not understand. I have researched on this mechanical spirit weapon before. Its fighting strength is not bad, but Three Spirits City has better mechanical spirit weapons, and the quality of their mechanical martial artists are also extremely high. Gold star treasures were extremely rare. Even in the 12 ecliptic palaces, there were very few of them. All the constellations viewed gold star treasures as the most precious power, and rarely did they leak out. The more stable the constellation, the less they would leak out. Only the unstable constellations that could not protect their own gold star treasures would leak out. Clan Elder and muttered to himself. Beside him, Lu Yizhi and Shaoan had congealed expressions. It was obvious that Tang Tian's news was extremely important. Now, it is Ursa Major constellation's only chance. Screw was startled. The words pierced through his mind like lightning. This is the 4th batch of star treasures. Pai Pa's tone was excited. Their grades have risen to different degrees. The majority of the silver star treasures already have signs of gold transformation. Up till now, there are a total of 22 star treasures that have completely completed the gold transformation. 22 gold star treasures, the value that they held was already able to affect the entire war. If they used gold star treasures to refine spirit treasures, it would increase the strength of the Saint unit by a huge margin. Saints were high-level fighting strength, and were already not rare in the battlefield. Monsters. That was the plan that could truly have a profound influence on the entire war. It was the most popular argument, and was seen as the only choice for Ursa Major constellation. If Ursa Major constellation did not expand, then when the Honorable Martial constellation with the 4 palaces was completely digested, Ursa Major constellation would lose its last hope. The military generals beside Tang Chou all revealed excited expressions. In that moment, Heaven's Road actually had a feeling of danger. Scorpio constellation, huh? Tang Chou thought. A direct and terrifying question was placed in front of Heaven's Road. Who was Tang Tian's blade aimed at? The Chief of Intelligence perspired in perspiration and anxiously said, "This subordinate is also extremely suspicious. I have sent people to investigate, but there are no relevant reports." The urgent mission that was posted in the Bronze Hall had long caused an uproar. Although no one understood the master's intentions, but the astonishing number of monsters would only be used in wars. Speaking of using monsters, in the entire base, their monster unit was the best. Ursa Major constellation's fighting strength was astonishing, but what truly made Elder and fearful was the vitality displayed by Ursa Major constellation, which the other constellations did not have. The 12 ecliptic palaces were lethargic, revealing their old age, while Ursa Major constellation was like a young man, full of vigor, and had great potential. It was not their first time fighting with Tang Tian. Wait till this matter is cleared up. Leong did not hesitate. In such a sensitive period of time, the series of reactions that resulted from the implementation of the Roar plan was hard to predict. Can the front lines hold on? Pai Pa asked with concern. If we want to play, let's play bigger. Tang Chow's eyes revealed a crazed look. When the number of star treasures is enough for the entire army to equip, then we will equip. The military generals were all startled, they did not dare believe their own ears. They were at the front lines, enduring immense pressure, and the current honorable Marshal Constellation army was becoming more and more difficult to handle. If this batch of star treasures were to equip the front lines, it would greatly alleviate the pressure. This subordinate is useless, and was unable to find out. The Chief of Intelligence immediately said. This word inexplicably triggered his blank memories, and many blurry images started to flash past. Countless blurry faces, broken mechanical weapons that could be seen everywhere, the smoke that pervaded the air. His body trembled uncontrollably, and tears flowed down uncontrollably. Why? Tang Cho asked. The military generals around him were also attracted. You said that Tang Tian suddenly came back? And then he started to wantonly order monsters? Chapter 825. My life is incomplete and incomplete, my memories are blank, only this feeling remains, I think it is reminding me of why my life exists. Hearing Tang Tian's explanation, Dooku became silent again, his heart filled with unwillingness. After returning to the sacred Saint Galaxy with much difficulty, he thought that he could go all out and compete with the strong martial artists of the honorable martial continent, but who knew that he would be assigned to defend the desolate city? But he knew that Tang Tian's arrangements were logical, and could not speak for a long time. Their improvement is already very fast, since they have never interacted with them before. Nie Chio said, compared to Zhong Li Bai's fanatical stubbornness, he was much calmer. You and I have never commanded a mechanical army before, and all of those tactics are only on paper, whether or not they can be used, we will only know after actual battles. Thoughts? Zhong Li Bai laughed out loud and said, They are not your obedient subordinates, they are bandits, and this is the law of survival that they are familiar with. In their world, only the strong have the qualifications to survive. The 45th house. Let's go. They could not see the end. Do you not believe in our strength? Sai Lei raised his eyebrows, and looked at Tang Tian with disdain. Pai Pa, who was by the side, covered her mouth and chuckled. The mechanical engineers shouted, all of them were excited as they sat on the thick shoulders of the monsters. Have you thought of how to pay the fees? Nie Chio was surprised. Master, maybe you created all of this unintentionally, but your request is our bugle call, your will is our glory, and wherever your sword points to, is where we will die. He Jiu walked on the streets, his heart trembling with fear, he was extremely careful. He had concealed his identity as an honorable Martial Continent spy well, and he was not worried about his identity being exposed. But the city that he was once extremely familiar with, had become so foreign. Time to deliver. The mechanical engineers who were in deep slumber all jumped up as though they had awoken from a dream. Tang Tian was startled for a moment. This door seems familiar. Isn't this the way to? Suddenly, dang, the melodious sound of a bell sounded out, the entire city could hear it. No. Tang Tian shook his head. Duke almost thought that he had heard wrongly. The others around him also looked at each other. It was like a crazy beast, like a blazing volcano. An indescribable invisible power surged and burned in every corner of the city. Hiju felt cold all over. More than 80 newly completed monsters stood quietly in the open space in the courtyard. They were not painted at all. The ugly welds were like scars, the rough edges that had not been smoothed, and the burrs that could be seen everywhere made them look ugly but strong. These mechanical engineers began to move the monsters onto the carriages in a flurry. Their expressions were excited, the veins on their foreheads popped out, their faces were covered in oil and dust, making them look as sinister and ugly as the monsters. The same scene, on this workshop street. This was the 45th time he saw it, he counted along the way. What a joke! If Uncle Bing knows that I brought Screw to the battlefield, he will definitely fight with me. Pai Pa solemnly bowed towards the endless stream of carriages. The sharp eyesight of a spy allowed him to see the entire workshop. It was not that he did not have worries in his heart. The tactics he had designed were directly related to the number of mechanical spirit weapons. The more mechanical spirit weapons there were, the stronger the power they could unleash, and if the number of mechanical spirit weapons were not enough, the power they could unleash would be limited. Unexpectedly, Du Xianu suddenly spoke up. Her tone was indifferent, her face calm. Niechio smiled. Although because of the time constraint, we do not have enough information, but it is barely enough. We finally have a chance to turn things around, you better not be lenient. Niechio was worried. Will they think of something? Dooku was speechless. We will always fight by your side. One after another, ugly monsters stood neatly on the carriages. They were as dense as a forest, as though they were soldiers going out to battle. Tang Tian did not know how he arrived at Sai Lei's side. He was in a daze. Screw's words had given him a huge shock. The more attention Desolation City attracted, the more useful it would be for the entire war. The relationship between the two of them had eased up a lot, although they were still competing, but the reality of the situation often forced them to work together, but in terms of tone, the two of them did not give in. Tang Tian opened his mouth, but no words came out. Zhong Li Bai's face immediately became ugly. He snorted, without even saying a word. He turned and left. He had not slept or rested for the past few days, and had been training hard. But in the ear-piercing cutting sounds, in the flickering light auras, they stood there quietly, not saying a word. An indescribable fear suddenly pervaded out from the depths of Hejio's heart, causing his entire body to turn cold. Desolation City was like a nail that was nailed to the back of the honorable Martial continent. Quickly calculate, how much have we done? Are the carriages ready? Load up the carriages. Stop wasting time. Every shop was open, but there were almost no workers, and they were all empty. Tang Tian said honestly, because I feel that only you guys can defend Desolation City. On the base's tall tower, Pai Pa looked down. The surging flow of carriages filled the streets, causing her to feel extremely proud and moved. Because of this, Tang Tian was happy for a few days. Knowing that he had some knowledge, upon returning to Three Spirit City, Tang Tian looked for Tang Chou and Pai Pa to give him some advice. Tang Chou's standard naturally did not need to be mentioned, and Pai Pa's ability to see the big picture was also outstanding. But what Tang Tian did not expect was that his idea was actually praised by the two of them. Three Spirit City. The road was also empty, without a single person on the road. Using war to nurture war, survival of the fittest. Zhong Li Bai said indifferently. He subconsciously pushed open the door. Tang Tian awoke from his dream and immediately asked, "Hey, how's the preparation for monster?" Sai Lei brought Tang Tian to a door and said indifferently, "You'll know when you open the door." After thinking about it, Dooku's thoughts became clear, the unwillingness in his heart disappeared, and he laughed. "It's fine if the honorable Martial continent doesn't come, but if they do, we will let them have a taste of our power." The Sin Domain generals responded in unison, their morale soaring. The originally empty street was suddenly flooded with countless carriages, as if a flood had entered the city. How many mechanical spirit weapons can Master bring over? The familiar bright light entered his vision. The distant bronze door was still as majestic as before, but he could not hear the shouts and shouts of the past, nor could he see the figures that were constantly running. Not even the dust could be smelled. Dooku raised his head in shock, and looked at the generals around him. Seeing that everyone had heaved a sigh of relief on their faces, he understood. As expected, I am not as calm as my sister, and only know how to be brave. To the generals of the Sin Domain army, the Sacred Saint Galaxy was an extremely unfamiliar place, and the majority of them had a trace of fear. Yes, I know better than them how monsters should fight. Screw did not avoid Tang Tian's gaze. Zhongli looked at the bustling training grounds. His dense gaze was like a raging flame, but his tone was extremely calm. Have all the scouts been sent out? When the time comes, don't go blind and make me lose face. Master, rest assured, we will definitely do our best to defend the desolate city. He bowed to Tang Tian. I'll leave it to you. Are you all right? Sai Lei looked at Tang Tian with concern. She noticed that Tang Tian was in a daze. He Jiu was submerged by the flow of carriages. He was at a loss and did not know what to do. It's still not enough. Zhongli Bai's expression was fierce, like a wolf that wanted to devour its prey. His fierce gaze swept across the entire field. The standard of the mechanical martial artists of Ursa Major constellation dominated Heaven's Road. The motley crew in front of him, although they had outstanding physiques, but compared to the mechanical martial artists of Ursa Major constellation, they were far from it. The metal plate in front of the workshop said, Workshop Street 45. To be able to defend the desolate city, with the familiar Sin domain behind them, and their own family, to everyone, it made them feel even more at ease. Zhong Unit's encampment. Zhongli Bai had a long beard. His hair was messy. His eyes were sunken in, but his gaze was as sharp as knives as he stared at the Zhong unit who were sparring in front of him. What exactly happened? Zhongli Bai was clear of his own problem, and said, School fees have to be paid, no one can avoid it. It was a carriage specially used to transport goods. It was extremely simple and crude. It did not have a roof, and only had fences. You want to follow me to the sacred Saint Galaxy? Tang Tian looked at Screw in front of him in shock, completely unable to comprehend the situation. 87 sets. Zhongli Bai, who had already decided to walk the path of mechanical spirit weapons, became the crucial point. He passed by a mechanical workshop, and the ear-piercing sound of alloy cutting attracted his attention. The door of the workshop was wide open, and when he looked towards the source of the sound, he saw a middle-aged mechanical engineer whose upper body was naked cutting the alloy. Dazzling sparks almost covered the mechanical engineer's face, and the only thing that could be seen was that amidst the sparks, a pair of bloodshot eyes that were extremely focused. Nie Qiu did not mind. It truly makes one look forward to it. Everything is ready, we are just waiting for the mechanical spirit weapons. Why? Nie Qiu stood quietly by his side. After absorbing all the energy in the desolate continent, the Null Division had always been the Zhong unit's sparring partner. The Null Division's future direction of development was warships, and in the Honorable Martial Continent, the only way they could replenish their warships was to steal from their enemies. The two of them had perfected Tang Tian's plan, and thought that for the Desolation City to attract the attention of the Honorable Martial Continent, they had to create a huge commotion. If he wanted to cause a huge commotion, he would need sufficient strength. And once the Honorable Martial Continent reacted, they would definitely send a large army, and without sufficient fighting strength, the Desolation City would not be able to defend. In the shadows in the corner, there were a few sturdy men covered in grease. They were sleeping soundly, obviously extremely tired. Screw looked straight at Tang Tian, his pale white face extremely calm. Although I do not remember anything, it has been too long, to the point that my memories have been erased, and only my feelings remain. Even after such a long time, I am unable to erase my feelings. I think it should be the most important part of my life. Is it time? Damn it. If I had known, I wouldn't have slept. Isn't time pressing? Tang Tian was not embarrassed at all and made a face. The desolate continent that was exhausted of energy was even more beneficial to them. Tang Tian, who had just returned to Three Spirits City, was stopped. If you follow me, what will happen to the Desolation City? They will definitely not be able to defend it. One after another, ugly and sinister-looking bronze monsters, under the light, silently occupied the first corner of every training ground. Chapter 8:26. Everyone's movements froze. What happened next caused him to lose his voice from the cheering that was about to come out of his mouth. Rumble, rumble. Wright had already gained a bit of fame. What is that? The white light in Wright's eyes was a unique martial technique. It has already been dug by someone. But, when a few meters tall rocks appeared in front of them, they did not dodge or jump, but rushed forward without dodging. Seeing that, the others all kept quiet. He did not know what it was, but his intuition of danger allowed him to make an accurate judgment. The mining ship flew in the opposite direction with its fastest speed. The others immediately jumped into the cave. Using the shovels in their hands, they effortlessly dug through the rocks. Their coordination was extremely good, and in the blink of an eye, they were already 100 m underground. His eyes lit up with a faint white light, and after a moment, he spoke out, 30 degrees to the right. Luckily, the profits from mining were good, and if they were to find a rare ore vein, a ship of ore could be exchanged for wealth that could last them for a few years. That was why there were so many people who came to take the risk despite the danger. When the Honorable Marshall Continent had just unified the various continents of the western region, the original continent was removed and renamed to District. But who knew that everyone was already used to calling it continent? Even the internal members of the Honorable Marshall Continent were the same. The term district was rarely used, and could only be occasionally seen in official announcements. The tremors on the ground became stronger and stronger, which meant that the distance between them and the other party was getting closer. Wright stood at the bow of the ship, which flew slowly and steadily. Some of the abandoned mines were overgrown with weeds, some had turned into ponds, and with the flow of time, they became a part of nature. The gigantic rocks were like rubber balls that were struck by a wooden stick. They were directly sent flying into the sky, drawing out a parabola and smashing heavily a few hundred meters away. Dig down. Wright did not say anything. He stared intently at the mine, the white light in his eyes becoming brighter and brighter. The experienced captain no longer had any hopes of getting lucky. He took out his weapon and bellowed, "Prepare for battle." Wright's face revealed a look of joy. He never thought that they would be able to dig out the fixed blue crystal. The captain's face became ugly. He was extremely regretful. I should have changed to a faster mining ship. All of the glimmer martial techniques were extremely complicated, from shallow to deep, from low to high. It was actually a huge system. The martial techniques inside were of varying quality. Many of the martial techniques focused on ridiculous points, such as saving energy. In the sacred region where energy was abundant, there was no need for complicated changes for such a ridiculous reason in the eyes of everyone. Glimmer Eye was something that could only be bought in Arthur City for 1 million light coins. Wright's glimmering eye was not bought, but given to her by her grandfather. It was said that his grandfather served an elder and was deeply trusted by the elder. When grandfather was alive, his family was extremely prosperous. Later, his grandfather died in an accident, and the family gradually declined. The rock formation shook imperceptibly, and the rock powder fell down. Before he finished speaking, a bronze-colored line appeared on the mountaintop in the distance. Another member hugged the air with his arms. Who, as if sucked in by a hurricane, countless rock powder transformed into a black dragon, passing through the man's arms and flying out of the pit. Most mining groups were small in size, with about 10 people. Unless one had special abilities, the requirement for combat strength was quite high. The desolate wilderness was not like the safe and secure city. Fighting and stealing were common occurrences, and if they were to dig up a rare ore vein, it would attract covetous eyes, and even cause a few mining groups to pretend to be bandits and work together to snatch the goods. Luckily, they were all experienced veterans, and their skills were proficient. In half an hour, all of the blue fixed crystals were meticulously cut out and transported to the mining ship. The other people's faces changed, and they jumped onto the mining ship in a flurry. "Everyone, be careful!" The captain could not help but exhort. His face was filled with joy as he patted Wright. "Old rules, you get 20%. Glimmer Eye was a glimmer martial technique, and was said to be specially researched by a few clan elders of the Honorable Martial Continent, to benefit everyone. Rocks fell like rain, and ugly and sinister monsters suddenly rushed out. Mechanical weapons. The reason why it was called Glimmer martial techniques was because they were extremely intricate in their control of energy, and were completely different from the martial techniques of the Sacred Saint Galaxy. There were many Glimmer martial techniques, and their systems were complex, and the higher-ups were open to the public, but there were not many people learning them. The Bronze Flood was unstoppable, crushing all the obstacles in front of them. This was a huge business. After being in this business for a period of time, who would not have taken a few lives? His teammates scolded and scolded, their faces were filled with disappointment, but they were not too excited. Shallow veins of ore were always easy to find, and it was not strange for people to be the first to find it. In the vast wilderness, all sorts of large and small mines could be seen everywhere, and some of them had hundreds of years of history. The terrifying Bronze Flood was surging towards them at an astonishing speed. The speed was so fast that it caused people to be tongue-tied. The Honorable Martial Continent was vast. The eastern and central regions were the most flourishing, while the western region was much more desolate. The White Fields continent was situated at the western edge of the Honorable Martial Continent, and was widely known as the White Fields continent. But, although the western region was not as prosperous as the eastern and central regions, but due to the abundance of minerals, there were many businesses that invested in the mining industry. Wright knew more than the average person. He knew that the Glimmer martial technique was not trained by any clan elder, but came from a mysterious place. He had always trained in Glimmer Eye, persevering in training, allowing him to observe the minute flow of energy. But he needed to concentrate and hold his chi, and was unable to use it in battle, making it a useless ability. When Wright checked again, and announced that there were no fixed blue crystals missing, cheers sounded out again. The distance between the two parties quickly decreased, and they could see even more clearly. The continuous collisions caused the rocks to explode. The mining boat steadily stopped, everyone jumped down, and a charred black pit appeared in front of them. The other members around him were all panicking. It was only until his first time mining, when he suddenly realized that the energy flow on the surface seemed to have some sort of connection with the veins of ore, that he suddenly realized that he had trained in Glimmer Eye and how to use it. Wright's words caused everyone to be roused. Without any instructions, all the strong and healthy members jumped down the pit. A bright white light lit up on their bodies. The leader was a strong and sturdy man, who was like a snow bear, suddenly crouched down, his palms quietly striking the hard rock stratum. Damn it! We were too late. They finally understood what was the movement just now. Just at that moment, the ground suddenly trembled, as though there were tens of thousands of horses galloping. Wright, who trained in Glimmer Eye, had the sharpest vision, he exclaimed. It's a mechanical weapon. What people feared the most was the unknown. Mines and mines could be seen everywhere, they were scattered everywhere, and occasionally mining boats would appear. Unless it was a large-scale ore vein, only then would there be a large-scale mining camp. But that required an astonishing amount of investment, and only a powerful trading organization could have the capital. What was more common were mining groups. They would drive small-scale mining boats, like hunters, to search for small-scale ore veins in the wilderness that were easy to excavate. The rocks that had just landed were once again flooded by the Bronze Flood. Wright's face was pale white. He had been in the trade for a long time, and had seen blood before, but he had never seen such a huge movement before. There were many reasons. Firstly, it was not cheap. Secondly, it was too different from the current martial techniques, although it would sometimes make people's eyes light up, but most of the time it was unable to be integrated into the army, and this greatly limited the future of the cultivator. The trembling became louder and louder, and the other party got closer and closer. It was these problems that greatly hindered the development of Glimmer martial technique. Although Wright was young, she was an expert in searching for ores. Even the experienced leader could not stop praising Wright for this. For them to be able to obtain such a good profit, it was all thanks to Wright. When a long line of blue crystals entered their field of vision, everyone couldn't help but cheer in unison. The Whitefields continent was a typical mining continent. The mining boat followed Wright's directions and slowly turned. After flying for about 5 kilometers, Wright suddenly said, "Stop!" The members all took out their tools, their movements were different from before, and became extremely careful, afraid that they would break the fixed blue crystal. A perfect fixed blue crystal and a fixed blue crystal fragment, the price difference between the two was 20 times, and they had to be careful. Chi fixed blue crystal was a type of expensive crystal ore. It could be used to smelt metals, strengthen ships, etc., and could be easily sold. Although the ore vein was not big, but with the most conservative estimation, it could produce over 70 cubic meters of fixed blue crystals. They had never seen such an ugly mechanical weapon before. Its body was thick and swollen, without any sense of beauty. Its production was extremely simple and crude, without any paint. The ugly centipede-like welds were exposed in the air, without any edges or burrs. It looked extremely crude. Everyone's face was flushed clean, their eyes filled with fear. Are they wild beasts? Countless of mechanical weapons, like a tide, poured down from the mountain top. The exposed mountain top, in the blink of an eye, was submerged by the densely packed bronze torrent. The captain's eyes constricted. Gold continent people. The captain's face changed. Such a ship full of fixed blue crystals, if anyone were to see it, it would definitely attract the greed of countless people. He shouted loudly, "Everyone get on the boat! Retreat immediately!" If it was any other mining group, the screeching sound of the ship flying would definitely be terrifying, but compared to the movement in front of them, it was nothing. The extremely concentrated rumbling sounds seemed to be knocking on his heart. He could even see the small rocks on the ground being shaken to the point that they jumped up and were half a meter off the ground. A mining boat slowly flew in the sky above the wilderness. It was a small-scale mining boat, its length not even reaching 30 m. The body of the boat was mottled and old, extremely simple and crude. Most mining boats were like that. Their biggest use was to carry ores and supplies. If they were to meet with danger, they could abandon the boat and escape without hesitation. A 20 m wide hole suddenly appeared on the rock. The edge of the hole looked as though it was cut by a knife. Chapter 8:27. Wright's heart trembled. He silently scolded them for being bandits, but he did not dare stop. Then we can only go to Daylight City. Other than buying warships from the trading organizations, the Daylight Army's warships are also docked there. Zhong Libai rode on the monster beast, rumbling as he patrolled the area. What kind of assault is that? It's a pile of dog shit. The robust man's gaze shifted from Wen Kong to Tang Tian. It was obvious that Tang Tian was the master. He was suspicious. Isn't Wen Kong at the Sin Domain stronghold? Why is he accompanying him? Could he be a guest of Wu Xian's army? When Screw finished scolding, Zhong Libai raised his head and argued with a lack of confidence. This assault should have been completed well. Screw did not hear the two of them arguing. His gaze was attracted to the spoils of war. Nie Chio released a light chuckle. Zhong Libai looked over and was enlightened. Fixed blue crystal, a local mineral. Who are you people? Although Zhong Libai's style was wild, but he came from a traditional academy, and the importance of discipline was an instinct. Furthermore, he was mocked by Nie Chio the last time, causing Zhong Libai's heart to be filled with anger, and the importance he placed on the discipline of the army had reached a point where it made others speechless. Yes, people say that he has a lot of experience in this aspect. Nie Chio changed the topic. Daylight City is the capital of the Whitefields continent and is the largest and most flourishing city with the most population. The Daylight Army that is stationed there is rather strong, and the key point is that they are very alert. I suggest that we wait for Master to return before making further plans. Returning to the camp, Zhong Libai was prepared to report to Tang Tian, but upon entering the meeting room, he was immediately scolded. It was not easy for him to maintain his composure at such a time. Wright clenched his teeth and stood up. Everyone had respect for Screw from the bottom of their hearts, even Zhong Li Bai, who was an arrogant and unruly person, only had respect in his heart. What made him even more convinced was that Screw had immediately displayed to him, a fake monk, what it meant to be a professional. As there were many mining groups all over the wilderness, they were natural scouts. Once there was any movement, it would quickly be reported to the nearest city. This made the Whitefields continent's information extremely sensitive, and Arthur City, which was the closest to them, had most likely received news of them. After all, with such a large group of people advancing with such a terrifying momentum, they would be discovered from far away. This is your level? Unlike the desolate wilderness, Arthur City was quite lively. Mining groups came and went frequently, and they were often unruly, so fighting was a common occurrence. There were also many bandits living in this area, so Arthur City's walls were very tall and there were many sentries. It was his first time encountering a fixed blue crystal, but as the chief mechanical engineer of the Southern Cross Army, who had interacted with countless of materials, he had an extremely sharp intuition towards new materials. Wright was dumbfounded. That will depend on whether you are worth enough to survive. Zhong Li Bai's tone was indifferent. What's the nearest city? However, thinking about Arthur City's location, Tang Tian could somewhat understand. Wright could not help but ask. No one bothered about him. The few mechanical weapons acted as though they did not hear him. They had long seen Zhong Li Bai from the corner of their eyes, and were afraid of any movements that would attract Boss Zhong's attention, that would be seeking death. Zhong Li Bai carried Wright and turned to leave. Wright secretly observed the mechanical weapons in front of him, and the Gold Continent's mechanical weapons that he knew of had a huge disparity. In the ancient eastern region, the Gold Continent's mechanical weapons were meticulous and refined, they were of superior quality, and would definitely not be made so crudely. Still good. Screw had a look of ridicule. In one assault, 3 people were injured. Oh, the reason was because they were stepped on by their own people. You call that still good? Monster is a waste in your hands. I have never seen such a low-quality mechanical martial artist before. Arthur City was a typical mining city, and the most prosperous industry was related to mining. The smelting and trading of minerals was the city's pillar industry. Zhong Li Bai was completely submissive and obedient. When Screw first came, he did not think much of it, but when he found out that Screw was the inventor of Monster, his attitude immediately took a 180-degree turn. A sinister laugh came out from the other side of the street. A robust man covered in tattoos brought a group of people to block Tang Tian and the rest's path. His gaze was fixated on Wen Kong, filled with rage. A few mechanical weapons stared at them like tigers watching their prey, and if they made any strange movements, they would be attacked. Master has already gone to Red Soil City? Zhong Li Bai's eyes opened wide. On both sides of the street, there were smelting workshops, red furnaces and boiling molten iron, which made Tang Tian feel extremely familiar. But when his gaze swept across the people around Tang Tian, his heart trembled. When Kang's face turned white. It was like a small-scale three-spirit city. The only difference was that there were no mechanical weapons on the street. The Honorable Martial Continent and the Gold Continent were in the west and east, and they were at the extreme west edge of the Honorable Martial Continent and were extremely far from the Gold Continent. Wright's respectful yet graceful words surprised Zhong Li Bai. He sized up the frail-looking Wright. Zhong Li Bai's face flushed red. He was so embarrassed that he wanted to find a hole to hide in. He sized up Tang Tian, but could not see through him. Wen Kong, you still have the guts to come to Arthur City. He licked his lips and controlled Monster King to walk towards the mining ship. Buying warships. Zhong Li Bai had a look of suspicion. Knowing that Nie Chio's last sentence was to provoke him, Zhong Li Bai snorted without hesitation. It's just a mere bright light city. Raising his head to look at Arthur City, Tang Tian was surprised. Arthur City was gray, the black city walls looked extremely sturdy. But it looked extremely backward. After being used to the flourishing cities of the Southern Alliance, the Arthur City in front of him looked like an unremarkable small town. Zhong Libai knew that Nie Qiu was not speaking blindly. "We need it," Screw said directly, his eyes lit up. "It can strengthen monster. If they were to head towards Bright Dawn City, it would be impossible for them to not be discovered." Upon entering, Wright was dumbstruck. Such a ferocious assault is actually not up to standard in the eyes of these people? Seeing Zhong Libai's ashamed expression, for some reason, Wright felt a chill run down his spine. "Yes." Nie Qiu remained calm. "Master has asked clearly. There are 2 places in the White Fields continent that have warships, one is Bright Light City, and the other is Red Soil City. Bright Light City's warships are mainly in the hands of the local armies. Master said, this problem will be handed to you. Master, head to Red Soil City, and see if you can buy a few warships." Screw was enraged, and only stopped after scolding for a full 10 minutes. "If I were you, I would immediately find a piece of tofu and kill myself. An army that has casualties in an assault will always cause people to worry." Nie Qiu said casually. Wright did not beat around the bush. "Master, it is Arthur City." But he was not afraid of Wu Xian's army. In terms of backing, Wu Xian was still lacking. Zhong Libai was completely stunned by the scolding. Rage surged in his chest. Killing intent pervaded out uncontrollably. But when he saw the person who was scolding him, he immediately quivered and obediently listened. Screw suddenly opened his mouth and interrupted the 2 of them. After entering the city, Tang Tian could clearly feel it. Wright's mind moved quickly and without hesitation. Bright Light City and Red Soil City. Warships can be bought in these 2 cities, and we usually buy mining ships from these 2 cities. Being undisciplined was the nature of bandits and roaming bandits, and for them to be obedient, it was harder than ascending to the heavens. However, evil people would be tortured by evil people, and meeting Zhong Libai, who was even more ruthless and ruthless, these people were completely subdued. Wright's hands were tied tightly. The black ropes were made of an unknown material, they were extremely sturdy, and no matter how much strength he used, he was unable to break free. Beside him, the other members were also tied up tightly, and sat on the mining ship. After hearing what Tang Tian said about Screw, everyone was extremely shocked. 10,000 years was enough to cause metals to decay, mountains and rivers to disappear, but it was unable to extinguish the obsession of a remnant spirit. Thinking about that, Nie Qiu had a headache. The master's temperament is still too wild. Although he had many bodyguards by his side, and the master's own strength was formidable, but as the lord, he did not need to take the risk. All of these workshops placed the refined metals and crystals neatly. From time to time, mining ships would descend to the backyard of the workshops, and pour the newly excavated ores there. The blue crystals were neatly cut into cubes, sparkling and translucent. He looked down at the captives on the mining ships. "I only need 1 guide, the rest can be buried." "Master, your army is so majestic, and has such a large number, you need more guides. In the White Fields continent we are familiar with every mining cave, including every city. Master, please allow us lowly people to do our best for you, in exchange for our lives." "What is this?" Zhong Libai was enraged. "Do you want to fight?" But there were not many citizens living here, and most of them were related to mining. Zhong Libai licked his lips. "I need warships, brat, do you have any ideas?" It was the first time he had seen such an ugly mechanical weapon. It was not the Daylight Army that worried him the most. What worried him the most was not the Daylight Army, but the mining groups. As long as the White Fields continent met with a large group of bandits, the White Fields continent would call for the mining groups to help fight against the enemy. The mining groups were relatively strong, with rich fighting experience, adding that they were extremely familiar with the place. If there were many of them, it would be enough to pose a threat to them. When Kong was extremely tactful, as long as Tang Tian revealed any interest, he would immediately introduce it to him. Tang Tian's group of people looked like they were not to be trifled with, and the people on the road all avoided them. He is a true warrior. Zhong Libai loved Monster King so much that he could not bear to part with it. The monster's fighting style was to his liking, the unstoppable assault, using force to meet force with force. The feeling of contentment was so wonderful that he was addicted to it. Nietio glanced at Right and coughed lightly. Master has already set off for Red Soil City. Zhong Libai's voice did not contain any emotions, but the killing intent in it caused the hearts of the group to tremble. Nietio, who was naturally cautious, felt that with their current strength, they could definitely fight steadily. Very good, I like intelligent people. I hope that all of you are as intelligent as him. Even Nietio, every time he ran over, he would respectfully sit at the side and listen to him like a student. Zhong Libai scoffed, but we don't have money. The Monster King that he controlled was personally created by Sai Lei, using a large amount of new alloys. Its performance far surpassed ordinary monsters. Its entire body was painted black, it had a thick and short body, it was sturdy and strong, its scarlet eyes indicated that it was an extremely dangerous super monster. The tactics that he had thought of were criticized by Screw to be useless, and changed beyond recognition. The crucial point was that every change was extremely targeted. Wright and the captain looked at each other, and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Initially, they thought that they had met with the Gold Continent's roving bandits, but now they realized that the bandits were not ordinary. How could bandits have such strict discipline? Tang Tian's group first arrived at Arthur City, which was a place that they had to pass to reach Red Soil City. The other captives quietened down. Wright's words made them see a glimmer of hope. Whoosh, the faces of the captives on the ship changed, and a commotion broke out. Chapter 828. The middle-aged man in the attic across the street had already made up his mind to get his hands on this saber. He didn't know where this country bumpkin came from, but he actually had such a precious treasure on him. Leave this battle to me. Auden was a man of few words. Strong physical strength, superb blade techniques. The crimson saber light flashed and disappeared in a flash. Fu Jingji looked at Tang Tian, who nodded his head. Ji Zhe's eyes turned cold. He lowered his body and slashed upwards with the bewitching blade. Auden, beat the drum and go down. At this moment, someone whispered into Ah Lai's ear. Who is behind Ah Lai, the Western traders? At the thought of the punishment they were about to face, fear took over their hearts. These hoodlums were originally a group of desperados. At this moment, their entire bodies were bursting with light, their eyes red as they madly pounced towards Ji Zhe. 30 meters away from Tang Tian, Auden stopped and said expressionlessly, "Surrender or die." Before he could finish speaking, Ji Zhe's figure disappeared from where he stood. Because he was seriously injured in a battle, Auden had no choice but to retire. The competition under a famous general was extremely fierce and cruel. However, his dazzling resume made him extremely popular. The middle-aged man spent a huge sum of money to personally pay a visit to poach him. A piercingly cold, killing intent spread out on the street, and all the onlookers fell silent. The light coins in their hands were obtained from the captives, which amounted to 2 million light coins, with Wu Xian, who was killed by Tang Tian, contributing the most. It wasn't his money anyway, so Tang Tian didn't feel bad at all. There was no need to stir up trouble for the sake of 200,000. The energy in the White Fields continent was much denser than the desolate continent, and the weakening they received was much more severe. As for how to use the laws to control energy, they had only just touched the threshold. Right now, Ji Zhe was only relying on his outstanding body and skilled saber techniques to fight against these hooligans. Sima Xiao revealed a shy and bashful smile like a boy next door. Ah Lai's words stopped abruptly. He was dumbstruck. An extremely thin thread of blood slowly appeared on his neck. A moment later, countless amounts of blood foam gushed out. The burly man fell on his back. His eyes were wide open, as if he couldn't believe that the other party dared to make a move. When Kong was shaking like a sieve, the saber switched to the left side and went in sideways. I didn't expect someone to be able to comprehend the laws. Just now, none of them thought that Jizai would really dare to make a move. In addition, Jizai's saber was too fast, so they couldn't react for a moment. This saber, Fu Jingji laughed. These people in front of him did not have the slightest energy fluctuation. Did these country bumpkins naively think that they could survive in Arthur City with brute force? Ali was killed by them. You want this knife? Jizai looked at the brawny man with a faint smile. Jizai's situation was indeed somewhat difficult. The strength of this group of hoodlums was stronger than he had expected. Moreover, there seemed to be a pattern to their advance and retreat. Thinking back to what Master had said, the sacred Saint Galaxy worshipped the domination of the army. Now that he had seen it, it was indeed a well-deserved reputation. Even the hoodlums knew how to cooperate. Jizai was immediately in danger. A perfect saber light containing a demonic aura slashed at the white saber light. Jizai's tone was cold. His handsome and devilishly handsome face was covered in dark clouds. He was not a good person to begin with, at such a young age. He was already a martial artist on the list of powerhouses in Sin Domain, and with the arrogance in his bones, how could he tolerate being humiliated by a cat or dog? Fu Jingji reminded, "Don't make the scene too bloody." But very quickly, more and more people noticed the uniqueness of the bewitching blade in Jizai's hand. Regardless of how violent or tyrannical the energy was, the blade was able to easily split it apart. Furthermore, they also noticed that Jizai did not have any energy undulations. Jizai, who had grasped the enemy's weakness, flashed with a bewitching light aura. The defenses of the shops on both sides of the street automatically activated, but the shop owners did not have any panic on their faces. They were long used to such fights. Blood splattered everywhere. It was a beautiful flower. Everyone roared in unison. The spectators all sucked in cold breaths. None of them had ever seen such an exquisite blade technique. After being in the mining business for so many years, he was extremely familiar with all sorts of metals and materials, and his eyes were sharp and ruthless. But from the moment he saw it, his eyes were fixated on the blade. The middle-aged man did not ask why, but asked, "If you were to lead the protection unit, would you be able to win?" Tang Tian, who was eager to go out, was prepared to fight, but in the end, someone beat him to it. His gaze became even more passionate, and his breathing became hurried. The few of them slowly fell to the ground. All of them had the same injuries. All of them had a line of blood on their throats. In the next moment, he made his decision. His gaze suddenly became gloomy, and he softly ordered the servant beside him. Arthur City at the western border was never a safe and secure place. If one wanted to survive there, one had to be strong enough, and would quickly be swallowed whole. All of the people beside the robust man were not weak. 50,000? The robust man sneered. That's the capital, 200,000 with interest, and we will consider this matter settled. The middle-aged man continued to ask, "Who will win?" Fu Jingji asked, "Oh, then what's the price?" But what did that matter? Who knew? Is Master Ao Deng going to personally take action? Over 10 blade auras and sword auras suddenly shot out, instantly enveloping the entire street, leaving Jizai with nowhere to dodge. When Kang's face turned pale white, the thing he was most worried about had happened. Previously, he had taken the opportunity to come out with great difficulty, and passed by Arthur City on his way back, and gambled. He lost until his eyes turned red, and borrowed money, but who knew that he would lose everything? He was afraid, and escaped back to the stronghold in the middle of the night. No matter how powerful the other party is, they will not dare to go to the stronghold to collect the debt. The middle-aged man trusted Ao Deng. Suddenly, an orderly group of figures appeared on the other side of the street, with a bald, big-statured man leading them. Unknowingly, a bald, big-statured man had appeared by his side. The bald, big-statured man had fierce eyes, a scar that extended from his left eye down to his brow bone, looking extremely terrifying. He understood killing intent too well. For such a congealed killing intent, it was unknown how many people this group of people had killed. Jize squinted his eyes and took a step forward. The middle-aged man's gaze finally shifted away from the bewitching blade, and looked at the young man in the middle of the group, guessing his background. He is so young, but has so many bodyguards. He must be a young master of some family. Kill. Ao Deng, Blade Master. The middle-aged man revealed a satisfied look. The white blade aura was forcefully slashed apart, but Jize's body trembled, and his wrist felt numb. More and more gazes were attracted to the blade. When Kong knew that the group of people killed without blinking, and did not dare to hide anything, and said, 50,000 light coins. Jize's state of mind was extremely calm, and did not waver because of the situation. Although the power of laws was affected, but the power of the physique was unaffected. The abundant power of the physique allowed him to move like a ghost. Every time he was about to be hit, he would dodge it by a hair's breadth. With a flick of his wrist, the bewitching blade released a crimson circle of light, and the energy bullets that were shooting towards him were like clay oxen entering the sea, disappearing into nothingness. Jize's figure swayed slightly, bringing forth a few afterimages. He immediately deceived the attacks of a few people, and borrowed the momentum to rush into the group of people. The robust man did not want to complicate the issue. The most important thing was to get his money back. He was experienced, and knew that he could not easily offend people of unknown origins. If the other party had a powerful background, then it would be a huge problem. The other party seemed to have awoken from a dream, and roared as he pounced towards Jize. Ao Deng did not disappoint his trust. Under his meticulous training, the strength of the guard unit was far from any ordinary army. There were a few times when they encountered bandits, but in front of the guard unit, they were like tofu dregs. Fu Jingji then asked Wen Kong, "How much money do you owe?" Jize's eyes lit up. The blade auras formed from energy truly had a might that could not be underestimated. Countless of white blade auras and sword auras enveloped the entire street like rain. His mouth revealed an indifferent smile, and he suddenly spoke out, "What do you think?" The robust man snorted, "You guys want to stand up for him? That brat owes a huge debt. We will accept it, 200,000. Fu Jingji said calmly, "That is a blade with life. Or should I let Allah probe them?" Jize's face changed. He could sense the strength of the other party. The energy undulations of these people were many times stronger than the hoodlums. They were in an orderly formation, well-trained and filled with killing intent. The coordination of the sacred Saint Galaxy was stronger than the Sin domain, but the intricacy of their martial techniques could not be compared to the Sin domain. The robust man and the rest felt a burst of cold air assaulting their faces, as though they were being stared at by a venomous snake in the shadows. Jize's temperament was gloomy and cold. The bewitching blade in his hand was crimson red, adding an indescribable bewitching charm. Allah was not afraid at all, his face filled with arrogance. "That's right, this young master has taken a liking to your blade, be tactful. He definitely gained enlightenment on laws." Allah immediately became fearless, the fear on his face disappeared, and he snorted, "Sorry, but it is no longer that price." "What's the problem, friends?" The aura that Jize emitted caused him to be fearful. The bald man was called Ao Deng, and was the commander of his bodyguards. When Ao Deng was young, he had once held the position of a commander, and his superior at that time was one of the 5 great generals, Jia. A bewitching crimson light aura flashed past. Jize kept his blade. His expression was normal, but he was gasping for breath. He had expended a lot of his physical strength, and was about to retreat. He had never seen such a stunning weapon before. "What material is it made of?" What is so mystical about it? Of course, with so many people dead, how can the Western traders let it go? None of them will be able to escape. No one is allowed to snatch it from me. Ji was able to obtain a place on the list of powerhouses at such a young age. It was all because of fighting and killing. He had rich battle experience, and his adaptability was strong. After struggling bitterly under the attacks of the enemies, he gradually grasped the strengths and weaknesses of the sacred Saint Galaxy martial artists. The attacks from the energy aura were truly terrifying, and if one was hit, one would definitely be injured. But in Ji's eyes, although their attacks looked powerful, they were only borrowing the power of energy, and the standard of their martial techniques were rather ordinary. On a building not far away, a middle-aged man stared at the two groups of people who were confronting each other. His gaze was fixated on the crimson blade in the bewitching man's hand, and greed flashed past his eyes. That also meant that he was completely relying on brute force to fight against the energy. Behind him, 200 red-armored martial artists stood solemnly. 1,000,000. Ali revealed a pleased look and pointed at Ji, and this blade,